The date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Councilman Hache?
Here.
Councilman Seaton?
Here.
Councilman Voigt?
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh?
Here.
And Mayor Knudsen.
Here. Please join us in observing, I'm sorry, flag salute. Please join us for the flag salute. Okay. Please join us in observing a moment of silence honoring the men and women serving our nation, our first responders, and a moment of reflection for those who've suffered or died at the hands of violence. Okay. Thank you. We'll take public comments not to exceed 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Leonard Eisen, 762.
Is that on, Mr. Eisen?
What?
Is a green light on?
Yes, it is on.
Okay. If you could just speak into the microphone, please.
Okay, it's 762 Upper Boulevard, Ridgewood. I just want to welcome the new members to this village council. I think you have a lot to do, more than you think. So I wish you well, and I hope you can persevere and don't worry about what other people say. That's it.
Thank you,
I try to be brief in my remarks.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Dana Glazer, 61 Clinton Avenue. I just want to repeat what was just said. Welcome aboard, guys. I'm so excited to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So no more, we'll close public comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, here you go.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen DeCelie, and I am a resident of Glen Rock. And I thank you in advance for your cooperation this evening on listening to me. I'm here to speak to you guys about a proposal regarding the acquisition of a strip of land on Prospect Street right next to the water treatment plant. That involves a proposed zoning ordinance change in Glen Rock, as well as an application to the planning board in Glen Rock. And I understand from reading the minutes from the January meeting that Rick Development, Mr. Rick Harrison, and his attorney, David Rutherford, were here before you guys and presented some information to you. Now, contrary to what you may have been told or understood, this is not being received favorably in Glen Rock, in particular to the people of Prospect Street. So I wanted to come to you tonight to let you know that, because I think it's important that you have all information available to you. Admittedly, there was a first reading of the zoning ordinance, and at that first reading, there was a tie, 3-4, 3 against. And our mayor, not surprisingly, voted for it. He's also a member of the planning board. Now, the second ordinance was contemplated to be held on July 27th. And interestingly, the council put that vote off until September. And I think that is an interesting fact because it demonstrates to the public that the council understands that there is a reluctance regarding the zoning ordinance. Now, no one, I would say, that opposes the ordinance could be considered a NIMBY, not in my backyard. What we are suggesting is that the council and the planning board haven't fully addressed the questions that need to be answered for Glen Rock residents. We continuously ask questions and they're not answered. For example, we've asked questions about traffic patterns. We get pointed to the developer's traffic studies, not our own town studies. When a developer presents studies, they would be conflicts of interest. When we've asked about water studies, because on Prospect Street there is quite a lot of flooding. In fact, I pointed out at the last council meeting for Glen Rock that our police officers are likely aware of the flooding on Glen Rock during each storm because they tend to be on our block, putting cones around and directing traffic. When we asked about the water studies, again, it was from the developer and his studies. These are not objective-based studies. I know my time is limited, so I'm trying to just give you little pieces of information that you need to understand. And I think importantly, you are all aware of the municipal land use law, and it sets forth the basic framework associated with establishing and maintaining land use in the state of New Jersey. While that law permits the municipality to enact a zoning ordinance, that power remains to three major constraints. The exercise may not conflict with federal and state constitutions, not necessarily an issue here. The authority may not be exercised in conflict with authority of the power of the county and the state governments and federal, not being done here. The authority, however, must be exercised in strict conformance with municipal land use law. As to this third factor, I'm informing you that I don't think, as well as my neighbors, that our council in Glenrock is actually doing what it's supposed to do. It has to secure the area safety from flood. That has not been analyzed. Again, I was just telling you, there's a lot of flooding on Prospect. It also is responsible to promoting the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of the persons, the neighborhoods, the community, the regions, and the preservation of the environment. Our council and planning board has failed to address that issue, and I'm just pointing this out to you guys because over the next course of the next few months, our neighborhood, our town, will start vigorously advocating against this ordinance. We have been silent. We've asked our voices to be heard. We are going to get louder and louder, I can assure you. And I respect each of you, and I think as you make your decisions, you need to understand what's going on in Glenrock. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, come on up.
I'm Joe Connor, also from Glen Rock. Sorry about this. I'll be as quick as I can, but I've been involved in this for an awfully long time. And I think it's worth pointing out, I don't know if everyone is aware of everything that's going on here, but there is that slither of land that has to be sold for this thing to go through. As Kathleen pointed out, the water is a major issue in that side. I'm sure you're all aware of that. As things get paved, the water table rises, and it causes nothing but havoc in people's houses. The Glen Rock, and I know this isn't our town, but I do want you to know that you're stepping into it in a bit, in a way here, if you sell this slither to this developer, because there is a big pushback going to happen within town, and we're kind of the leaders of it, and it's not going to be, it's going to be pretty rough within Glen Rock, but I just want to let you know that it's going to be something else that you guys are going to have to deal with if you decide to go that route to sell them that small part of the acreage. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, now we'll close comments. Just before we continue, I just wanted to point out to my council colleagues, they each have a little gift in front of them, and a nice little bag is a gift from a resident. Linda McNamara dropped these off. It's a little guardian bell for everyone to wish them the best of luck and in their execution of their duties and obligations as village council members. So it's a lovely gift, and it's for positive energy. So everybody has that. Thank you. And with that, we'll go on to our first discussion. We're going to motion to suspend the work session and convene a special public meeting.
Right.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, very good.
Hache,
Yes.
Seaton,
Yes.
Voigt,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
and Knudsen.
Yes. Okay. So we'll call this meeting to order. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to same as provided by law of a schedule including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Councilman Hache,
Here.
Councilman Seaton,
Here.
Councilman Voigt,
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh,
Here.
and Mayor Knudsen.
Here.
If you wish, I'll read them in full, or if not, then we could do them on a consent agenda. I wasn't sure if you were all in favor. I think you are. This is one to correct an error, and the other was to retroactively appoint some zoning board members who were overlooked.
Right, so that's one member of the planning board that we needed to correct, and the two, which is Isabella Altano and Gary Negritz and Diana Rule to the Board of Adjustment. And I think if everyone's okay with just doing it as a consent.
Okay, so I'll read them by title only.
Great.
Appoint member to the planning board and appoint members to the zoning board of adjustment. May I have a motion for both resolutions, please?
So moved.
Second.
Hold on. Hache,
Yes.
Seaton,
Yes.
Voight,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
and Newton.
Yes. So motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so we're back. Okay. And so we'll start with our first discussion item is parking and moving forward, which will be led by Deputy Mayor Seaton.
Thank you, Mayor. So basically, here we are. I'm just going to go through a bit of a timeline. We had a referendum vote, non-binding, in November, where a 2-to-1 majority of residents came out and voted in favor of some kind of a parking solution. Then fast forward, we had a binding referendum in June, and a 2-to-1 margin of residents came out and voted against the proposed solution for a specific area. So this kind of leaves us now sitting here thinking, what are we going to do? So I just wanted to have this conversation with everyone here in public to basically decide what we want to do moving forward, and maybe put together some sort of package of recommendations that we could prioritize and implement relatively quickly, or maybe longer term. But we needed to start this conversation now because there is a need for some sort of parking solutions downtown. The residents want it. They weren't necessarily in favor of a large garage on Hudson Street, but they seem to be in favor of something. So that's why I just wanted to kind of gauge everybody's ideas and just see what we could all bring to the table, and we could get rolling on this sooner rather than later. So I mean, my idea was to do one-way streets downtown, whether you include Cottage or not. I don't know. We'd have to look at that, and we could add angled parking on one side of Chestnut, Oak, and North Walnut, where it's currently parallel parking, which would increase parking on the street right in front of the places where people want to go. Maybe we could do that at Cottage too, but again, we'd have to look at that, and I'd like to maybe wrap that up with everyone else's ideas to move this forward, to kind of get something going as quickly as we possibly can. So if anybody would like to just jump in and say any thoughts or ideas.
So Mike, are you looking for a more comprehensive plan?
Yeah.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
So some of the thoughts I would assume would be to involve not only the residents, but some of the committees that are underneath us, and whether it's the safety committee, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, having those people involved, I think would be important. And so are you looking kind of like as a subcommittee for committees? Or?
We're going to get to that, I guess, later on in the agenda. It's item number 6 under policy, the Business District Advisory Committee. So they would have a part in, looking at the Central Business District, at parking issues, at any other kind of beautification issues, maintaining tree wells, things like that. I mean, all things Central Business District, they would be involved in. But what I was more interested in is thinking like, like infrastructure, or do we want to add a deck, or some kind of a garage, or what would we want to put together as an entire plan? And thinking if you want to construct something, that would obviously take a little bit longer. But I mean, some things we could do is, maybe hire another parking enforcement official to chalk tires and really enforce repeat parking and things like that. So all ideas, big and small, that could be implemented.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing here is there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and by low-hanging fruit I mean very inexpensive solutions that are now reinventing the wheel. Some of them are pretty common sense. I think one of the big things that I've noticed, and I've gone to have breakfast in downtown at 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday morning. And going to one of the establishments there, and I noticed that all the on-street parking spaces were already occupied. 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday. So I drive around and I see that, Walnut Street lot is empty. I see that Cottage Place is empty. There's 171 spots at Cottage Place. I find parking on street, on Cottage, and I go into the restaurant. There's about 12 or 14 people, including myself. So, obviously, it's merchant who are parking on those on-street spots. So I think one of the first things that we can do, and again, this is all, and if you think of the central business district or even just the parking situation around town, it's one big ecosystem, and there are things that are going to help, the vitality of it, and things that are going to detract, from it. And I think what's important is that we need to provide that parking relief, throughout the downtown, even before we begin to build a parking deck. Because I think, the minute that we start breaking ground on Hudson Street, we lose automatically 100 spots. And we're losing spots on street parking because that's going to be blocked by construction. So it's important to provide parking relief in the rest of the downtown. And I think one of the main points, I think the low-hanging fruit is really finding a way for our merchants to be able to park off-street. That may involve, leasing some lots in town that are not being utilized today. I think it at the very minimum should involve better enforcement on the parking. The enforcement now is kind of spotty, and spotty enforcement means no enforcement. I think that's one of the things that we need to look at. I know that years ago there was a change from a 2-hour limit for the parking, and it went to 3. And in speaking with some of the business owners, they felt that was a good compromise in terms of providing patrons plenty of time to be able to walk and shop and dine in the downtown without having parking enforcement become too cumbersome. I think 3 hours is plenty of time for people to get things done, but we need to work a little bit better on the enforcement. And I see a lot of the merchants. I see people go out there with a roll of quarters and they keep feeding the meters all day. So I think if as a community we're getting together to come up with a comprehensive parking solution, the benefit, obviously there's a clear benefit to the business owners. There's been a benefit for residents who are so frustrated about not finding adequate parking in town. I think we need to work together, and it will require the cooperation from the merchants as well as our responsibility to enforce the parking limits.
Great. Bernadette?
Yeah. So just as to kind of circle back to what's already happening. So, I mean, my opinion is that we shouldn't vacate the options at the Hudson Street lot. I think that there's too much money invested thus far to just vacate that idea. I agree that a comprehensive solution is going to be important, but I also think that our 2 council members that are on the planning board will have to also give us some insight into the applications that have been filed thus far, and how they're going to impact the CBD, because that is going to happen. There's nothing we can do to stop that while these other solutions are being thought of. So, having this being our first meeting, I think that we still have a lot of work to do, and I think that, we have to include all the different avenues when we discuss it.
So just as a question for Roberta, is this in terms of just the angled parking, because it's something that we've talked about for quite some time on the Tree Street, so,
Yeah.
So is this something that we can have the village engineer and our traffic consultant, we can have them look at and make a determination as to how many spaces? I recall that just last year, I believe it was, we went back and looked at Chris actually looked at some of those areas that we could squeeze in other spots. I think one was right in front of It's Creek to me. So we can look at that and see what the number of spaces we'll actually get.
Yeah, I think that Chris did do an analysis a couple of years back and looked at this, but it was very brief and it was very high level. And there were some positives and there were obviously some negatives. On the going to one-way streets, I think if you want to pursue that, I mean, my recommendation, my advice would be, maybe we go out with an RFP and pull in some traffic consultants, because it's not just a question of the angled parking, it's a question of what one-way streets are going to do to the traffic flow. Right. There's been some studies that have suggested that one-way streets in CBD areas deter people from shopping there. This happened, I don't want to compare us to Hackensack, but it did happen in Hackensack. They went to one-way streets, and now they're reversing that decision, because what happens is people go by and they don't want to really come around and go back. So I think that I'm not saying it's a major change, but I do think we need some experts to come in and look at it, and I think it would be if you wanted us to pursue this, Chris and I can certainly work on putting an RFP together on looking at this issue, because it's an issue of the traffic flow as well. I think as far as the fact that folks are parking again and again and again, we have upped enforcement to a degree. It's not the easiest thing to enforce, but I would also say that we have encouraged CBD employees to park in two places. One is Ken Smith, and the other is Cottage, right? In Ken Smith, I think last I checked, there were 70 employees parking there, about 70. Bad news there is that they took back we had kind of a public-private partnership with them. We ended that, and they're changing their rates from $80 a month to $100 a month. How many CBD employees that takes out of the equation, we're not sure. The other part is Cottage, and in Cottage we have something like 20, I could be off by a couple, 20, 25 employees parking at Cottage. It's been really frustrating because there's a lot of, as I've said before, and it's true, there are a lot of spots on that side of town. So Cottage is empty, I wouldn't say empty, but 40% full, 50% full, et cetera. So, I mean, one of the challenges is how do we get the CBD to really kind of use Cottage? And it's not that easy because folks don't want to schlep and walk across town, right? So, I would just add that to the conversation. But we can certainly, if you want us to go ahead and start working up an RFP on looking at this, one-way streets and the angle parking, we can certainly start working on that. So it's...
is there a possibility, and I see Chris is here, because he has the schematics of the streets, could he just do a CAD design, without doing any studies, just a mock-up to show what angled parking per a standard, would look like? And then it would kind of give us an idea as to...
Just a kind of a brief idea of how many spots we could add, what happens with the aprons,
and
what
the
happens...
widths, because we know there's the width of the street, we know how a standard spot angled, we know, what angles you need to put the angle in, and would you have enough left in the center for emergency vehicles? Would you have enough left so that you're not going to have people backing out into each other in the angled parking?
Right, I mean, we looked at
Like
this,
the cheap
somebody raised
solution.
this for East Ridgewood Avenue, and when we did that briefly, Chris and his staff did that, it turned out that even if we made East Ridgewood Avenue one way, we couldn't fit angled parking on either side because you couldn't pull out, right? So, yeah, I think that's doable, Chris, right? I mean, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We have done a preliminary look at angle parking. The last time we did that was in 2006 in response to some queries and questions. It was interesting what we learned. It's not all comprehensive. Now, just taking a step back, we currently have angled parking on Chestnut Street between Ridgewood and Franklin, angled parking on Oak Street between Ridgewood and Franklin, angled parking on South Walnut between Dayton and East Ridgewood Avenue. We also have angled parking on North Broad Street between East Ridgewood Avenue and Franklin, both sides, if I recall. One of the things we have to look at with angled parking is what's the angle we choose. It may sound superfluous, but the angle is very critical because we have to maintain a throughway for our emergency vehicles. The angles also are problematic with the number of openings we have on our streets for driveways, access points, and for example, like on Chestnut Street, near the tobacco shop, we have a loading zone. We have loading zones on a couple of different streets. Businesses have to get their product. They have to stock up. In the mornings, usually they do that, and so forth. We can take a look at it again. I can reissue the memo from 2006 if the council would like.
That might be helpful, yeah.
I think so. I think that would be...
And I think it's a good idea because it kind of gives us a flavor, like if it doesn't generate enough spots, spending money to do a study might be, not the right thing to do, so.
Right, and presumably the direction, the one-way direction would be driven, so to speak, by the prospect offset, right? So to some extent?
Yes and no. We'd have to look at which direction we would want the streets to go. We'd have to look carefully at the traffic patterns. We would have to talk to the bus company.
Right.
New Jersey Transit uses, has the bus depot over by the Prospect Street lot across from Van Ness. They may have to pick another routing. That wouldn't be a sad thing for a number of our residents because it's a lot of complaints about the buses on East Ridgewood Avenue because they're very large, and the section of East Ridgewood Avenue from Walnut eastward to Maple has some very tight sections, particularly before Cottage. And many times people get very unnerved because the buses appear like they're about to cross the double yellow and hit them.
Yeah, and the other thing you have to consider is, I know this is a relatively inexpensive thing to do, and however, we would have to replace and move all the parking meters, right, in general, because, they're now parallel. So we would have to, unless we took this opportunity to say, let's
Park mobile.
go park
There you
mobile.
go. There you go.
And we would love that, because then we'd have even less quarters to take out of meters. But we have to consider that because it takes an option away from certain of our residents and visitors from using quarters, and, so.
Well, I was actually thinking about that a few days ago, and if it could possibly work, if it's close to working. I mean, if we don't get enough spaces, or it's not worth exploring any further, then that's a dead issue. But if it's worth exploring, then maybe we could, maybe we could implement this and just have Park Mobile on one side for a trial for a few months to see how the flow to traffic goes, how cars circulate around the downtown, if people are bumping into each other, if there's enough room for pulling out and angled parking, and then if it's determined that it works, eventually we could go back and maybe put meters back in, or people just stop using meters and maybe not put the meters in. But to try it out, we could easily use Park Mobile if it's something worth trying out.
And what we did the last time, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't here in 2006, but I do listen when you speak. And I think what we did the last time is we actually tested it. And we brought a truck in, and we backed it up, and we backed the other car. So we did some fake kind of what if, and that led to some of the results. But
for example, we would use the assistant engineer, Yovan Mahenzik. He drives an F-150 crew cab pickup. One of the police officers has the exact same truck. I literally would like to use those too. They're relatively representative of the larger vehicles that our residents use. We would have to design for the largest vehicle we'd anticipate, because if we didn't and those vehicles were parked in there, we could gum up traffic quite badly. Chris, one question. Since Park Mobile is not necessarily parking meter dependent, meaning you can park at any spot on the street and you just put the location number. If we went with the Park Mobile meters, is there actual meters, or is it going to be like a kiosk and you can key in sort of what space you're in?
Park Mobile doesn't have a kiosk, it doesn't have a meter. We would probably just put a sign up and designate a particular zone. This also, with Park Mobile, we also have another advantage. We can make, if we do go with an angled parking trial, we can make that zone a particular numbered zone, and then we could see what the yield is from that zone through Park Mobile. We might be able to compare it to what we currently get on the street, if that's possible, and then the council would have some metrics to look at.
I think it's an opportunity for us to look at the pricing of the parking as well. I think, the way I'm kind of looking at this is the closer you are to the train station, maybe the more expensive it should be, and the further away you get from the train station, the less expensive, and people can kind of self-select. If they want to pay less, they can park 3 blocks away if they want to go to the train. So it's an opportunity for us to look at the parking pricing in a more comprehensive way. And it's also an opportunity for us to, I think, generate some additional revenues here over and above what we're doing right now from the parking utility. And that may mean maybe extended hours. It may mean, differential parking pricing closer to restaurants and all that kind of stuff. So that should be part of the mix in this.
I agree. I mean, the plan always was that the parking lots, whether surface or a deck, would be cheaper than on-street parking, because on-street parking in general, even on the part of town that's not that busy, on-street parking in front of stores and stuff is desired premium parking. And the thought was always there would be a price differential between the deck / the surface lots. And
well, yeah, so depending on where we put the deck, I mean, if it's close to the train station, my preference would be that we price it accordingly.
Sure.
So people who commute would pay a little bit extra. It may be, they may bitch and moan about it, but I'm not sure it's going to be such an issue.
And going back to something Ramon said, I think there's been a lot of work done on pricing with the Walker studies. I mean, they're expert at this. They've come up with pricing models and pricing ideas and what if this and what if that. So we should try to probably look at that and leverage some of that work. I'm not saying we have to, treat it as the Bible, but we should kind of look at what they said. Yep.
So I think this is a great start. So if you're going to work on that, then we can all take a look at it and figure out where we go from there.
Okay, we'll do that.
We will do that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Are we putting, just to make sure I'm clear on this, we're putting together kind of a committee on this? How is this going to work?
Well, that's down on.
Point number
the-
6.
I think that's 6.
We'll get there.
Got it.
You're very,
So we'll
very excited about it.
I am.
We'll get there.
So, yeah,
I guess the only other question I had then was the second piece to this as well. Then, to Councilwoman Walsh's point, what do we do next with Hudson Street?
I'm for looking at a smaller garage there, to be honest with you. Ernie, that's, I guess, your kind of opinion. Yeah. We've done the prior council did a lot of stuff on this, and let's not waste it.
Okay, so just in terms of a smaller garage, you're talking in height and width and in...
Was it one level down, shovels in the ground? That was kind of the mantra?
I think that was the slogan.
I'm game for that.
Okay, so if this is the direction that you're thinking about, we need to think about how that gets done. And the estimate that we got from current architect/engineer/Desmond was that, to redo this was, a couple of shekels, So we have to make we have to make a decision as to how we want to move that forward. And whether it's to use Desmond/Shear or whether it's to go out and use somebody else is,
What are the shekels? How much are they?
Well, so the shekels, if they were to redo all the plans and stuff, if they were to say, okay, if we were to make a decision and say, go down one level, right? It would be about $80,000 to $90,000 to redo, the big documents of work that would have to be done. I think before one would do that, there needs to be a financial feasibility study, because we don't have one for a deck that size. So we don't have current, we don't have revenues that deck would generate. How much of the direct cost, not the debt payment, how much of the direct cost the deck would contribute to? Because remember, in the other ones, the 325, the 405, the 350, the 300, the deck almost offset itself in expenses, almost. And the smaller the deck got, the less able it was to do that, right? So the question is, if you go down to 250, how far off are we?
Yeah, so the FEC already looked at some of this stuff. I know Janice Willett sent me some, the smaller garage, I guess it was the 4-level, 3-story. And while it was more expensive than the higher one, my thinking is let's look at differential pricing as well on that, because I think you looked at the existing pricing. And if we were to kind of tinker with what suggested or even revised pricing would be, my guess is that deck would be less expensive. So
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Roberta, do we own the designs, Desmond and Shear's designs?
Yeah.
We own them, so we could...
Yes, right, Bob? I mean, we own the
So
designs.
we could take the designs if we wished
To
give them
somebody, yes.
to somebody else. We own the designs completely.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it in the original figures, but for the larger garage, what was the assumption of, in terms of the usage of the garage during the day for the numbers? Was it, 70% capacity, 80, 90?
It moved around throughout the whole day. I mean, I'd have to pull out the study. It's online, you could see it, but I would have to pull out the study. I don't want to answer that unless I'm specific.
Okay. All right.
I mean, we also have the added challenge, I just want to put this on the table, that it appears that Brogan is ending parking because they're getting ready, I suppose, for development. And last, when we spoke to Ken Cansamo, I think he said that there were 70 commuters parking there, and out of the 70, 50 were Ridgewood residents. So I just point that out, that we may not see that total impact during the summer because there's less traffic in town and there's more parking availability in town, but that could become a problem.
Right.
Is that application before the planning board yet?
So that's a site plan application. I think they've just finished their completeness review. We have not seen anything yet.
Is it on your agendas?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
My understanding on that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, is that there are no variances that need to be approved, just as an aside.
Right. Okay. Okay, very good. So we're good? All right, so moving on to policy. The first item we have is the Construction Board of Appeals.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry.
It's all right, I think Tom is here.
Yeah, Tom's here. I just want to introduce this a little bit. Tom can come up. I know you and I and Mike had this conversation, and it was a little confusing. So why don't, instead of me explaining it, why don't
Thank
explain
you.
it?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm here to talk about my proposal for the village to dissolve our local construction board of appeals. And what the Board of Appeals is currently it's a local body that's used to adjudicate matters from applicants who think they've been unfairly treated either in the application process or in the enforcement process through the building or a fire code. So in my tenure here, we've only had 2 cases. We don't have anything on the agenda now. Our current members' terms have expired. And one of the challenges I faced as I was investigating all of this is it's difficult, or I found it very difficult, to find 10 people that we could pick that met the qualifications that would be able to meet on an as-needed basis. What's attractive about the county is that they meet on every second Thursday of the month. They have a set schedule. They have current board members. Their actual application fee to make that appeal is less than what we would charge here at the village. They probably have, I spoke to somebody today in their office, they have about a 45 to 60-day backlog depending on the case. They could be, each case is viewed independently and could be adjudicated a lot quicker depending if it was dealt with a life safety matter that was imminent hazard. So my suggestion would be that we dissolve our Board of Appeals. It hasn't been a very effective in the last, in the time that I've been here. We're having extreme difficulty finding replacement members, and I think this is a much more efficient manner. It gives the applicant or the person who's making the appeal at least some structure as to, okay, well, the case will be heard on this particular date. It's going to cost me this amount of money. All I have to do is show up in Hackensack and wait for the hearing.
And I guess the other point that I'm not sure I heard you make is that there are 70 municipalities in Bergen County. Only 4 have their own construction board of appeals. Everybody else uses the county, and I think one of the 4 is looking to end theirs too.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up. We're one of only 4 municipalities in the county that has a local board of appeals. I spoke to my colleagues in Englewood Cliffs, Cresskill, and in Richfield Park. The construction official in Richfield Park is probably following our lead very shortly, he said, because it's they're facing the same challenges we are here.
Roberta, do we have a budget for this, or is it kind of, no?
There's no budget.
No.
We didn't even know. I didn't know about this until like a couple of weeks ago.
There is no budget. There should be no expense to the village whatsoever. It would be borne by the applicant.
Okay.
They would pay a $50 fee to have their case heard at the county level. And currently, if we were able to find members and reinstated our own Board of Appeals, they would pay $125.
Yeah, so I think even
Probably face the same time delays, too.
When you think about shared services, and we all say shared services, this is a good example of the county providing not just between 2 municipalities, they're providing a shared service for 66 municipalities and not charging us for it.
So Tom, I just had a couple questions. Just so we better understand how this works, could you just explain the two cases that you had before you during your tenure here?
I can speak to one clearly, Mayor. The first one was applied for, and it happened October of 14. I was just here. I wasn't really, the first case, or the one I'm more familiar with, dealt with a building here where, through much discussion between the architect, the staff downstairs, other designers, we couldn't come to a reasonable solution where the wishes of the applicant were merged with the requirements of the code. We had no opportunity, we had no choice but to have an independent body, the Board of Appeals, hear that case and render their decision. What it dealt with is there was a, it's over on Woolsey Square, there's a building that had same ownership, two separate buildings, separated basically by about a foot, all right, less than a foot. And one building had an elevator, the other building didn't. They wanted to utilize the elevator in Building A to facilitate access to Building B. To do that, they had to breach the firewalls. There was nothing that we could find. Like I said, through much discussion, code researching, we brought it to the Board of Adjustment, or the applicant, in this case, brought it to the Board of Adjustment. We each stated our cases, and the board came up with a reasonable solution that we're living with, we're dealing with. It's that type of an instance, and it's only those instances that would go to the Board of Appeals. What I want to point out, too, is the reason you only have a case, maybe one or two cases a year, is because we spend quite a bit of time researching this and finding alternatives and reasonable solutions to code-related issues.
Okay, and that's different than a zoning appeal?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
very different.
Yes,
Okay,
this only deals with folks that think they've been aggrieved either in their application process or a decision that was done on the enforcement side.
Okay.
Right, and that was the issue we brought up in our meeting, Susan, and I didn't know the answer quite to that. And
Right.
I would also
Tom
like to
just
point
answered
out,
it.
even though we're not in the habit of doing this, but if there's a penalty levied either by the fire official or by a building official, the amount of the penalty could be adjudicated by the Board of Appeals. They could certainly bring that to the board. So there's a few matters. Most of them obviously are code related.
Okay, great.
So, any other questions or?
No. I actually have one question. Is there a reason that the village manager is opposed to council? Isn't the appointing? Is there a legal reason for that?
I believe, in my research, it said that it was the ordinance was the manager did the appointing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's old,
Okay, great.
so.
Yeah, I think that resolution, or the Board of Appeals was established in 1976, and I'm not certain
Okay, great.
that the appointments...
Was it ever busy at any time?
I don't, I guess we don't know that, Tom, right?
I don't know that. I would
Okay.
suspect not very busy.
Okay.
Okay. Any other
Okay,
questions?
so, if anybody has questions during the week, just give us a holler, and if you're thinking about how to vote on this.
Great.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, our next item is the proposed encroachment agreement.
Yeah, so this is, we've seen this before. This is for that new restaurant that's going into North Broad. Steel Wheel Tavern wants to have those gooseneck fixtures. I think we saw this with Smoked on Woolsey Square. Encroachment into the right-of-ways are minimal. Chris and his team assisted the applicant in preparing the agreement. They're in favor. We're suggesting that you approve it.
Is, just a stupid question, is this a zoning issue that should go before the zoning board?
No, it's an encroachment agreement. I mean, Chris is
Okay.
here, so these are just common encroachment
right,
agreements.
fair
So
enough.
you'll see these occasionally. But actually, and just to be clear, the Steel Wheel Tavern came before HPC and the planning board already, and this is why they're referred to us for the encroachment agreement. So, and it really is going to look great. So can't wait till they open. So, anyway. Okay.
Okay.
Number 3, waiver of regulations for A-frame signs in the central business district.
Okay, so this was a big thing that we did very quickly. Businesses came up and said they'd like us to waive the whole requirement. You know, we had a requirement that said no A-frame signs. We said we would waive that. We would have a pilot from that time till December. We put requirements around waiving it to make sure it was safe, to make sure there was insurance, to make sure that people registered. And we said at that time that as time went on, we might have to tweak that resolution because we literally got that done in a week. So unfortunately, as you know, because I think I sent you all a note 2 weeks ago, we're not having total compliance, even partial compliance, with the pilot. And as a result, we've only received 8 requests to have the A-frame signs out. There are businesses that are just putting the A-frame signs out. Tracy, our enforcement officer, has been going around saying, you have to take the A-frame signs in, here's the application, fill it out, blah, blah, blah. We've had conversations, and I see Tony Damiano's here, but we've sent this issue to the Guild and to the Chamber. Joan is very helpful in helping us in talking to these businesses. So what we did here was twofold. We realized that the way we had written the resolution wasn't really clear that we had enforcement ability of the pilot. So what this does is gives us that enforcement ability, and also we had put a width requirement of 24 inches on the A-frame, and it turns out that they're more stable potentially at up to 30 inches. So this recommended amendment to that resolution fixes both of those.
Can you just give us a copy of the old resolution? Is it here? I didn't see it.
Yeah, this is basically the old resolution. If you look at the detail on the 3rd page,
That's the resolution?
that is the old resolution with the
Okay.
changes of no more than 30 inches, which
Got
is
it. Okay.
2C, and 5, failure to comply.
Okay.
We usually mark it up on a ordinance, but we didn't. Next time, we'll mark it up on the resolution.
Thank you.
So I've only seen a couple of them, and I guess my question is if it's wider, is there, and maybe I'm just not seeing it, where is the placement requirement? Because because with the outdoor cafes, if they then put a 30-inch sign and you have a sidewalk, you're pretty much using up your space there. So is there a requirement that it has to be, abutted to the building or facing out, or maybe I'm just not seeing it here?
Well, we do say in here, it actually is number 3.
Oh, yeah, there you
Thank
go, number 3, to restrict the 52-inch area. Okay.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, so we have to keep the 52-inch requirement.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be 30. We're just saying, actually,
stable.
Ed Sullivan came up to my office and showed us all these signs and how they worked. And so we thought 30 was okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I actually thought 30 was a little on the big side to me. I thought that...
The spread. Yeah.
We're talking, when we're talking about spread, we're actually talking about the size of the panel is, I know Chris is back there, so we're talking, let's just talk the panel that they're writing on. The panel itself is 30 inches wide by 36 to 42 high. Is that accurate?
No, this is the spread.
No, I'm asking because I'm asking, you're talking about, maybe Chris should come up and explain this, because I understood you were talking about the spread on the bottom, not the width of the actual physical sign.
Yeah, I'm talking
so
about the spread.
therefore, the width of the actual sign isn't listed anywhere. I think, is that maybe what Bernadette is asking?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The change that we made on the sign width, the physical placard or the sign physically, that's where we went from 24 to 36. The spread, I believe, I don't have the resolution committed to memory, I believe remains at 24. And the intent is that the sign is, so the traffic,
Yeah. You
So
might
we're
wanna
saying the
read
spread
it.
is no more than 30 inches from
30
edge
inches
panel
this
to edge
way.
panel.
Yeah.
Edge
As
panel.
Councilwoman Wall shows,
Right, okay, right.
Spread
That's
is
your spread.
Yeah, that's
that would be
spread.
36 inches, and that would be, I believe, 24 is the way it's stated in the amended resolution.
Width, I think, is 30 under this.
This-
So,
30.
so
The sign base spread on the sidewalk shall be no more than 30
Okay,
inches.
30 then, yes.
It was 24, it's now 30.
So we're just talking about the bottom of the tent that's
Yes.
spread?
Yes.
So the question is, how wide, because I don't see the width of the sign. It says no more than 42 inches in height and no less than 36 inches in height. But I don't see the width of
Like this size.
because a sign is just a panel and it has a dimension, so it's either
This,
from...
this.
Would you like to stand up and model
Right.
this?
So we have this, we want to know
Yeah.
how,
Right, how wide,
I could take another look at the resolution and see if it
Doesn't
needs
have
any
it.
language to clarify it.
right.
It doesn't, it just has the height and it has the spread, it doesn't have the width. I don't think we
Yeah.
adjudicated I think the thought was that we would look at them and then come back after the pilot and figure out. But
Yeah.
if you'd like a width, we can.
Yeah, and here's the reason I think we should
Yeah.
kind of settle on a width, because very quickly, a 36-inch sign, that really consumes a lot of
Real estate.
sidewalk real estate.
Yes, it does.
And it's also not as subtle as a nice, quaint 24-inch width sign.
Absolutely.
So I don't think we intended for this to be, and I'm being a little facetious, but billboard size here. I think we anticipated a smaller, more subtle sign presence that allowed somebody to do like a daily specials or special sales, something like that, but not a 36-inch wide sign. I certainly didn't envision that when we initially spoke about this. So I think we have to settle on a width and have that memorialized in this document.
So we can add a width to this for next week. I don't know what you're thinking the width should be.
Oh, I know what I'm thinking.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm thinking 24 inches, to me, seems more than sufficient and doesn't consume a lot of the real estate and still gives everyone the opportunity to advertise.
Yeah. I don't know what width the signs are now that we've approved.
I can check with Tracy. I know
I think
we have a couple samples of those signs in our confiscated sign pile from locations outside the CBD, because there are these standard A-frame signs businesses purchase. And I don't have the width as you're asking for committed to memory.
Okay, so I think that's a discussion maybe we need to have and settle on now. If anyone else has a thought.
Did you want to go with 24 inch? We could just add it for next week. We could put 24 inches in, or we could also look at the current signs and see where they are, because signs we approved may not be approved under.
Interesting, because I thought actually we had a conversation about the width when we first did this, and I had always thought that we should settle in on a 24-inch width, but I leave it to everyone else to kind of weigh in on that.
Yeah, I guess we have to wait to see what the standard width of these signs are, because you wouldn't want to restrict it to 24 inches and say they only make, the smallest sign they make is 30 inches or 26 inches or something like that. So you would want to have the standard, pretty much what the average is. So you wouldn't want to disallow every sign that's out there.
So do we want to get that piece of information, and if 24 inches is a standard sign dimension, then we could include that in this? Is that how we would approach that? Okay.
That's fine. I think
I
that's
think,
fine.
I think I can produce a couple examples, submit them to Roberta so she can present them to you folks. I'll go measure the samples that we have in our confiscated pile, because they are like a standard manufactured item that has then the individual stores advertising slapped on it.
Right.
What we also see is individuals make A-frame signs out of wood or 2 easels.
Right.
Again, that's a little less standard.
And I do know that I think Kilwins, I forget his name, from Kilwins, he gave us the brochure with the different sizes, so we had that available. And I think that was some of the information
Yeah, so not
you're
to speak out of
speaking
turn here, but he's one of the people in violation because his sign's not heavy enough. So we've asked him to weigh the sign down,
about. Right.
and we've
Which
still-
is that, did we add that
the
in
weight
here? It's
thing.
in
Yeah,
there.
there's a
Okay,
weight-
great.
there's a
Good,
weight-
it's in
there's a
there,
weight
right.
thing.
And that's actually a very valid reason we added that. A police report was forwarded to my attention. A umbrella from one of the outside
Right.
dining establishments recently went airborne and struck a pedestrian. The pedestrian refused medical attention. Thank goodness they're okay. But it drove home the need that anybody who has these signs
Right.
provide us a certificate of insurance
Insurance.
to indemnify the village in the event a god-awful event occurs and an injury occurs.
Okay, very good.
So I think I'm hearing we're okay with the enforcement, we're okay with the, making it more stable potentially.
Right.
And those two things are fine. We're going to look at the width.
We'll go and look, we'll look at those documents, and
Yeah.
Chris can get back to us on those numbers, and then we could just figure out what our best width is that fits more in keeping with the historic central business
And if we
district.
can't do that by next week, we could still do
Insert
this.
that in. Right.
We should be able to, but we can still do this resolution on enforcement, because we really need the enforcement. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Okay, our next item, regulations for political and issue-related signs.
So this is our favorite.
Yeah. So I actually have a whole bunch of notes, but I open it up.
Heather prepared this, thank you, Heather,
Thank you.
with some kinds of rules for you guys to discuss. But the whole point here is, I think, Heather and I think, that those signs should not be allowed on any, and I think this is what it says, any public right-of-ways, not in that little grassy area, not in the pots, not only on your own private property. So that's kind of, I think, what this says in a nutshell.
No, I mean, I think, to me, like, unless I'm missing something, it seems pretty easy to amend this, because it already says in the ordinance that campaign signs cannot be affixed to public property or public utility poles, such as telephone poles. So you could just add in language that says, planters, tree wells, or the right-of-way, and that really should take care of it. I mean, unless there's, like I said, I'm missing something, and it's more complicated than that, but...
It is a little bit more complicated from a constitutional
So it is.
standpoint. Unfortunately, the lawyers do get their chance to speak in on this. You can't have regulations that just deal with political signs and not something else. So you're going to have to think about including any and all temporary signs. If you're going to keep campaign signs or political issue signs out of public property, then you're going to have to deal with temporary signs as well and make it pretty much applicable to all signs. So that's something you have to consider. The scrutiny that's used with regard to content-based restrictions is a lot more significant than it is with non-content-based. So you're a lot safer dealing with everything. And there's been a number of cases that have struck down regulations that just deal with campaign signs on public property, restricting campaign signs from public property. So you just have to think that through to make sure you're going to include all those things as well.
So then, just one quick question. The sign that we have at Van Nest that we put on the fence, we
With
allow-
one exception,
and the
there's always an
trestle.
exception. Van Nest has kind of become a public forum location for a number of things.
Yes.
Not only events, but also we have holiday displays. We've got a few other things that take place there. So with the exception of places that are public forum locations, you can deal with some restrictions that are specific to those public forum places, but from a general standpoint, you would exclude that and then deal with specific restrictions on that particular location from the restriction on of all signs on public property. So you have to carve out a little exception for that to make sure that you meet the constitutional guidelines.
So Matt, how did that get designated as a public forum place?
It's never had any official designation. The way that these things come about is that it's kind of the usage that has come about over the years. Van Ness Park has been used for a number of different things over the years for public purposes and things like that. So, without going into specific issues, you've got different events that take place there. You've got, as I mentioned before, holiday displays. You've got, people that use that for sometimes for tables for either solicitations or for, giving out literature and things like that. So that seems to have become that type of a thing. Now, if the council was so inclined, you could, fight back on that and really declare that there is no public forum place. But that may restrict some other activities from happening there that happen there on a regular basis. So, but it's really not a specific designation. It's really a usage type situation that's occurred over the years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, and then just on a quick question, because on some public right-of-way where there's identified as between the curb and sidewalk, in some instances, there's not a sidewalk. So do we designate that as with a certain, where there's a public right-of-way without a sidewalk, that the signs can be placed no closer than X amount of feet?
I'm pretty sure Chris can confirm whether or not all the streets in the town have a right-of-way that's alongside, hasn't been used, and is still designated as a right-of-way. And whether or not there's a sidewalk there or not should not control. It's
Right.
really that distance back from whatever right-of-way may
Right,
be there.
exactly. Okay. So we can rewrite this for next week, I guess. Okay, great.
Now, would it be a resolution or ordinance?
Oh, it would have to be an ordinance.
Okay, I would
right.
think so.
And it's one of those things we ought to just take a look at and close, because there's a lot of different things, such as time limitations. There's a few other things that you may want to think about with regard to these. You could always add them to it later on, but if you just want to go ahead and get this part done, we can certainly try and get that done for next week.
Okay.
So is it Matt that's going to be doing the
Yeah,
ordinance?
he'll write it.
He'll write
He
it,
will write
okay. Okay, just want to...
Okay, good. Okay, moving on, discussion of ordinance 3066. Okay, so I've actually provided a ton of background information on this, including the original ordinance, a tremendous amount of work that went into modifying the ordinance, as you'll see with your strikeout versions, and then there's a clean version. And I've also included the escrow fund distribution accounts, so everyone can see the kind of money that's involved and how difficult it is for objectors or anyone to come to the table and engage and participate in that process. So when you look at the original ordinance, some of the things that we learned during our work sessions going through the language was that the ordinance itself almost appears to give a directive that this is going to be an affirmative process. And essentially what we were trying to do is to retain jurisdiction over the master plan, have the village maintain jurisdiction over the master plan and not relinquish that opportunity to anyone, and always give planning board members or village council, whoever the applicant came before, the understanding that they need not move forward with the process, but in fact could say, at this time, we're simply not interested, that there were always options in this process. Now, this becomes essentially a whole new document, an entirely new document. And so I'm just looking for feedback as to whether or not it's time to repeal 3066 and revisit how to approach this particular issue, understanding that whenever somebody makes application to the Board of Adjustment or Planning Board on site plan reviews, escrow exists no matter what. So it doesn't affect any of that. So feedback?
So Matt, I have a question on this.
Yes.
So if the planning board or the council decides that they're not going to hear or listen to an applicant, how does that affect the applicant's right to any kind of due process, or is that the due process they have?
First of all, it would be the planning board. The council doesn't have that jurisdiction over any of these,
Right.
anything to do with either the 3066 or the amended one. It all depends upon the process, and what I think the amendment and the discussion with the amendment was meant to do was provide at least an opportunity to have a review with a decision before you accept an application as to whether or not it's even to be considered. And the old example of somebody who wants to make a residential property, a commercial property in the middle of a single family residential zone, you're just not going to, the planning board's not going to entertain it. So before it gets going, the planning board makes a decision about what the application is about, gathers the information that it needs to be able to understand what that proposal will be, and then they'll issue a decision on it. That decision is a planning board decision, which is like any other government entity decision, has a right to appeal from somebody who thinks they haven't been heard properly.
Okay.
So there will be a due process remedy with regard to it no matter what. It's just that there's an effort here to try and put a little more authority into the planning board with regard to how they go about taking on any of these proposals or applications, or even taking it on as an application. I think that was the effort. And Susan can speak to that better than I can with regard to those discussions.
I think that's part of the big issue, is that they are being taken on as applications as opposed to an amendment to a policy document, and it's taken on a different meaning. But if somebody came before the planning board, and I guess this would be for Matt, somebody could come before the planning board and pay a fee for a preliminary review for whether it be a minor subdivision, major subdivision, a change. They could have a preliminary review on a concept and pay that fee for the planning board. So it needn't go through this process in order to have any discussion. So the question, and I just wanted to go through a couple of the important points. I did provide I think it's Booton Township also has a similar ordinance, so I've provided that for everyone. But if you'll see through the strikeout version and the changes throughout this entire document, the entire review of the application process was essentially struck from this and rewritten. So it really does become an entirely new document, very different than its original iteration.
How are the fees determined for this, by the way?
Well, the fees are incurred. There's an escrow that's usually taken at the beginning of any of these reviews, and then any charges that are made by our professionals or professionals that are hired on the behalf of the planning board are credited against that escrow. And then from there, if the escrow gets depleted to the point where it gets close to being an even, they'll ask for, another escrow amount to be put in. I think that's the normal way that this is done.
So,
we don't run any risk of losing money on this, do we?
As long as everybody follows through and makes sure that the escrows are properly credited, the bills are sent out and that kind of stuff, no, we don't. That's the whole purpose for it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the escrow fees here, and we seem to be short on some of the ones that you provided. They owe us money, and I just don't want that to happen in the future.
I'm sure it's all been reconciled at the end of the process, but...
It was a few $1,000s that we were short.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was. I might not have had the final version of the escrow document, so it's possible that that's the issue there.
All right.
So, does anybody have any thoughts about how to move forward with this? I think that the people, in a sense, in my mind, I think people are tired of hearing about this ordinance. I think that it seems to have had, for all the escrow money and for all of the money that's been taken in to facilitate this process, all of these applications have subsequently wound up in litigation on both sides. We've been sued by our fellow residents, we've been sued by applicants, and at some point we have to really look at this and make a determination as to if this is in fact a problem. Any thoughts?
Well, again, I guess my concern is that if planning board decides not to move forward, they certainly can sue as well. And so we still may end up with the same amount of lawsuits as we had before. I don't know how to resolve that, but that may be an issue. So.
Well, there's still a due process. I guess they could appeal if the planning board decides that they don't want to hear an applicant, then the applicant can go and appeal through whatever processes or channels already exist to do that. So I'd be happy to repeal ordinance 3066 if it doesn't impact the village and there's channels and mechanisms to...
So Matt, there is a process for this, is an appeal process. It's kind of laid out as to how this would happen. I mean,
for an applicant? For a private individual? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's the same general process that anybody has a right to challenge a decision of a governmental entity.
Yeah.
So it's still there. That doesn't change this. The effort here was to try and clear up any concerns about the process, about how you go about doing this, because 3066 got a lot of attention and a lot of negative feedback, and the effort was to try and see if we can soothe that and make it a more understandable, an easier process for people to figure out what to do and what they had to do, and also keep the authority with the planning board. Roberta had a question to make sure that there was not going to be any money lost or any inability of any of the boards, because the council, say with Valley, the last time back in 2010 had to hire experts to come in to testify before the council, and that had to be paid by the applicant because that was a review of that master plan amendment. This one, the way I read it, it doesn't impact that at all. In fact, it maintains that same requirement. So.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? And just a quick, to repeal it, we actually would need an ordinance. Do we repeal by ordinance?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Okay. All right, anything else on that? All right.
So are we repealing it next week, starting that process next week?
Yeah, I believe that that would be a smart idea.
So is Matt being charged to do
Yeah,
the
it's-
appeal of the
The
ordinance?
ordinance is already written, the repeal is not a very difficult.
Right.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So,
Although I have to tell everybody I'm away tomorrow and Friday. I'm back in on Sunday afternoon, so I should have it for you Monday. So.
Okay, great.
No excuse.
Unless we get out of the meeting early tonight and I can go back. That's up to the mayor.
We're
just
moving
so
to
I'm clear, so there's going to be one to repeal 3066, and then there's going to be a new ordinance
Yes,
introduced,
I think
right?
I think that's what the council wants to
Okay,
do, right?
okay, I'm just making sure so I understand.
Right. The council wants to adopt the new one and
Okay.
repeal the old one.
Okay, okay.
Great.
And does the new one need tweaking by Matt?
Yeah, I
Tweaking by
think what
Matt?
we should probably want to do is first repeal 3066 and then go through the new version one more time with planning board members, reconvene. Unfortunately, our original subcommittee is very different now because we've had resignations from the planning board, but I could reconvene a group and go through it and then send a copy to Matt for his review and our planning board attorney, and maybe even, if we want Bruce Whitaker to take a look at it, or...
That's fine. So
Yeah,
then-
I think...
So we'll introduce the new one maybe August, September.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
Well, and we'll put that on, once we have a draft copy, we'll just put on a work
On the work
session so everyone
session.
can have it.
Okay,
Okay, great,
that's
very good.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
It still takes a while. You still have to have the
No,
full vote.
I was just asking, is it okay to repeal it and then kind of run with nothing for some period of time before the new version? That
No,
was my
I don't
question.
see it as a problem at all. You don't see it as...
Same process, and
Yeah, same thing.
I think we'll be fine.
Always the same thing.
How long is it going to take to repeal and then reintroduce, and is it like a month?
Normal process,
for
which
an ordinance.
is...
2 months,
2 months.
2 months.
2 weeks?
About
For an
2
ordinance.
months, okay.
Okay, 2 months.
All
If you start it, if you introduce it on Wednesday of next week, it'll be, a month and a half to 2 months after.
Okay.
Great.
Because we have whether everybody should know on the council that any of the ordinances that we adopt don't take effect until 20 days after the...
Adoption.
The adoption. So it's
Okay,
one of
great.
those Faulkner Act rules that happen to be state-controlled, so.
Okay. Moving on to the Business District Advisory Committee, Councilman Hache will lead that discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. So Councilman Boyd, this is the creation of that committee that we talked about. I think it's very difficult to have a discussion about parking that's independent of the CBD, because it's a symbiotic relationship. There are a lot of different aspects that need to be considered in talking about a comprehensive parking solution. But I think there's a widely shared opinion that the Ridgewood Central Business District doesn't function as well as it should. Over the years, we have witnessed a decline in the vibrancy of the CBD. Certainly looks very different today than what it did when I was a kid. Seems to have a lot less foot traffic and a lot of just less buzz than we have over the years. And some of the factors that have been cited include, but are not limited to, insufficient parking, the poor mix of businesses, traffic and safety concerns, and the decline of the traditional brick and mortar retailers. I think we all, have seen that. But many residents and merchants also share the view that we just don't draw the number or the variety of shoppers and diners that we should, and that the dining and shopping experience in Ridgewood is just not as appealing as it could be. Now, traditionally, many communities in New Jersey have created business improvement districts to address these similar concerns. And when we looked at, looking at this Central Business District Advisory Committee, or the formation of, the business improvement district structure just wasn't as appealing, just because given the necessary governance structure or the creation of a separate district management corporation, which requires actually hiring an executive director to implement the programs. And I think that, at the end of the day, we've done so many studies, we've looked at this thing so many times, it's not a new problem. I think it's, the vibrancy issue is a lot more recent, but the parking issue is much older. So what I would like to kind of put forth here and propose is a creation of this Central Business District Advisory Committee, which will advise the council on formulating the implementation of various initiatives to improve the vibrancy of the downtown. And these will include a comprehensive parking solution, and obviously enhancing the vibrancy of the CBD, managing the appearance of it, the marketing and the events in the CBD. And so this will require, I think, a pretty good cross-section of business owners, of folks in the community, residents, and just thinking through just sort of a basic structure. And again, this is just sort of a work in progress here. That committee should be composed of a council liaison, Chamber of Commerce president. I'm sure Paul will be excited to have more things on his plate. The Ridgewood Guild chairperson, again, because we want to take into consideration different activities around the CBD that we can promote more traffic to it, foot traffic. 3 downtown business owners or property owners, 5 residents, which would be appointed by the council. Hopefully get the participation from the police chief in an advisory level. The village engineer, also advisory, and obviously getting someone involved from the Citizen Safety Advisory Committee. I think that's really the first step towards creating an actual parking committee, even though that's not the purpose of the CBD Advisory Committee. I think that the first sort of item on their agenda would be that. Let's come up with a good solution. And maybe it's not going to be perfect, but I think that when you take into consideration, obviously, that there's a lot of safety concerns. Some of the solutions can be very simple. I was walking around downtown, been here long enough that I can navigate downtown with my eyes closed. But when you talk to some of the business owners and restaurant owners, they're saying, look, the great majority of the folks who frequent my store, my restaurants, are from out of town. Mm-hmm. There's a general view that, folks in town don't want to go downtown because of the parking and the hassle and so on. And they're actually afraid that negative opinion is going to, now reach folks outside of Ridgewood because of all the negative stuff that they're seeing in the press and the media. But it's a huge issue, and when you talk about the business district, it's intertwined with the parking. I attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting this morning, and jokingly, they said, yeah, well, we call this the monthly parking meeting. I mean, that's, but it is that important, it is that serious. I think that, obviously the benefits that can be derived from this Central Business District Advisory Committee will enhance the CBD, will lead to an improved and enhanced shopping experience and dining experience, could help us provide with a greater variety of stores, carrying the merchandise that we need and we want, have more family-oriented events that will increase in the district and attract people to shop and enjoy themselves. And just, I think it's almost common sense. The more attractive our shops become, the more of a destination that Ridgewood will become, not just for residents, but also from folks from out of town. That just means more revenue, and that means, more offsets. So I think this is sort of the first step to creating this. Normally, the way that you would fund this through a business improvement district structure, it's similar to this, and you can do it through a combination of things. One being assessment on commercial properties. Roberta, hence my question the other day about the assessed value, which is actually higher than I thought. But and also it could mean an appropriation from the municipal budget as well. So we have to think about how do we fund that, how we pay for it. But the important thing is, again, to build on the work that has already been done. A tremendous amount of work has been done. But we need to have a good, strong group of people that are going to really reflect the view of what the village needs. It can't just be all about what the residents think the downtown needs. It cannot just be about what the business owners think. It's really a combination of both, and just bringing people to the table and have dialogue and conversations, and really to do what's best for the village.
So I have a couple thoughts from when first of all, I think it's a good idea. The one thing I would suggest is that there be some kind of deliverable out of this. So in the end, you've put together a plan that says this is what we're going to do moving forward. Try to hold people's feet to the fire as it relates to the plan itself. I have some other thoughts on people who might be part of this or our committees. One of them would be the Financial Advisory Committee, helping to look at some of the, say, the parking rates downtown. I'd suggest maybe someone from the Planning Board might be on this as a thought. And I don't know what the appropriate size is to get people to function. I don't know if it's a 7 or 8 or if you make this too big, it might be a little bit too unwieldy. So the thought would be is just to try to get the appropriately sized committee so that so something comes out of it. But I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mike?
Well, yeah, I think it would be important to really get buttoned up what the makeup of the committee would be, because then the committee, we could really hit the ground running on this. So if we could come up with a definite makeup and structure of this committee tonight, then we could form it by resolution, I would imagine, next week, and then we could work on going out for applications and getting people involved and going through the process of populating the committee and having it get up and running by August, really. I mean, that would be the goal. So, I mean, if we want to really look at the makeup of this committee and kind of hammer it out now, I think that's what we should do.
One other thought is, I don't know if there's any grants out there that we might be able to avail ourselves of to pay for some of this. Just as an aside, and I don't know if this is applicable or not, this is maybe a little bit off base, but there is a brownfield grant out there for $200,000 that we could apply for. And we could use that brownfield grant to help plan the downtown, not only the area, say, not around North Walnut Street, but it certainly could help us, if we got it, it certainly could help us in planning around that area. And that may be traffic patterns, that may be businesses, that may be just us figuring out, where we put stuff and doing surveys. So that application, believe it or not, Heather, you sent this out a couple of days ago. And the deadline is August 10th for the brownfield grant, and one of us could certainly put it together. I mean, I'd be happy to take a stab at it, and then apply it, and then we could potentially use those funds to do this kind of thing to help pay for what you're looking to do, at least to start it off.
Yeah, there's plenty of grant money out there. The key is obviously making the application. Where there's been successes in the past in obtaining these grants, usually center around particular aspects of the effort, so particular projects. So if it's a beautification project, and there is money available for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I did. I proposed a business improvement district a while ago. So when I was doing the research into it, then I found out how involved it was, and there was three main ways to fund it. It was through an assessment on commercial property, it was an appropriation from the general fund, or it was grants too. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you could get a committee together, and we could have subcommittees will look at grant opportunities for different things, and I think it would be a good sort of way to really tie together, the chamber, the downtown, the businesses, the guild, and the council, because we have a council liaison to the Chamber of Commerce, but the committee could really sink its teeth into dealing with things that we have to deal with, as well as some things that like the chamber and the guild would already deal with, and kind of keep lines of communication open. And I think it's a good idea also.
Mm-hmm. Bernadette?
So I think the first thing that would be helpful for us and also for the residents is a mission statement. Because my only caution would be, are we competing then with what the Guild and the Chamber are looking to accomplish with their events and with what they do in the CBD? So I don't know, and you're at
Yeah,
the
no,
meeting, so I don't
yeah,
know if
right.
they already had the conversation about it.
So, so the discussion, the guild wasn't present, but the discussion that we had was really about kind of working together. So it doesn't have an impact. It doesn't negate any of the efforts that are already underway from the Chamber of Commerce. There are a lot of different events. So we were even talking about, the car show, how great it is, fills up the downtown, people come in, people go to restaurants. It's integrating all of that into what's already been done, but also now looking forward in terms of what is lacking, what is missing. There was an interesting article in the Record about what Englewood is doing in downtown. And, interestingly enough, they talk about the same things that we talk about, parking and visibility and, looking at retailers that, have web-based businesses but can have a sort of traditional kind of physical location for folks to come in and out. Lighting around the central business district, making it, and even giving some basically subsidies to place the lights for some of the retailers if they're willing to keep the lights on up to a certain point in the night, just to create a greater sense of safety when people walk around. Are the areas well lit? There's a lot of stuff, and it's not meant to substitute any of the stuff that's already been done. It's really just to complement and enhance. And the fact that those things are already being done, and a lot of it is being done really well, to include the input from the chamber and the guild and everybody else. They have the expertise, at the end of the day, on all this stuff. I think for us, it's just a matter of getting together the right group of people, the right think tank to make this happen, to implement.
So, Tony Damiano, do you have any comments on this? Yes or no? Yeah?
Sure. Put him on the spot.
Well, he's here.
I always have something to say.
We know Tony's
Well, I
to say.
applaud your efforts for
Just
the idea.
introduce yourself, please,
Sure.
identify.
Tony Damiano, 274 South Broad Street, owner of Mango Jam, North Broad Street. We have the same goal as the Chamber, to bring people downtown and to make sure that it is vibrant. The biggest difference between the two groups is residents can join the guild. But basically, we have the same mission. The downtown is a jewel, there's no question about it, but it is very complex, more than you would know. I spend, as you know, my store is 16 years old. I spend about 50 hours a week downtown, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. So there are many things that I would like to discuss. As far as the guild participation on a committee, I assure you I probably will be the one to assume that responsibility. I just need to see how I can fit it into the schedule, because the guild was an overnight success, and I've sort of created, I don't want to say a monster, but it has arms and legs. I was hoping to attract 50 people, and we had, that first year it was 150, and now we're close to 250. And it is a full-time job. And we run the 2 major events, the Film Festival, Jazz Festival, lots going on in the summer. Right now we're getting rained out on our movies in the park. As you know, I'm on HPC. I had to, after I resurrected the Arts Council, I had to step down as president. I had to step down off the Library Foundation to concentrate on the Guild. So it would really depend upon the time needed for me to join this committee. I consider myself a very seasoned retailer in many respects. So it would also depend upon who is on the committee, I'll be honest with you. Because I'm not looking to teach, I'm looking to learn as well, although I do have a lot of input. And I do apologize for never calling you to have that cup of coffee, but now my schedule is a little clearer, and I would love to do that and talk to you privately, actually all of you who I don't know as well. So yes, I applaud you and I would consider it, but I would like to have a private conversation. I do think it is needed, very much needed. Thank you.
Okay, so just moving forward, and I just want to understand how we move forward on this. If we were to move forward as defined in Councilman Hachey's draft document, we would have to create this by resolution.
Correct.
Okay. And so if we're, and we would integrate that mission statement into the resolution.
Usually you do, yes.
So if and I'm just thinking out loud here, so jump in, feel free. If we were to prepare this for next, can we prepare this for next week?
Well, I
we
heard
can't, right.
adding CSAC member, I heard planning board member, I
Right.
heard.
So if we can refine this
We have
list.
to, we have to know who you want besides what he's already listed, or if you even agree with everything. Maybe
Well, I'm
some
saying
of the 5 residents, maybe some of those could be a CSAC member or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get like a 15-person committee, it gets out of hand.
Well, it becomes cumbersome, but so my thought is to, if we were to create it as is defined in this draft document, then just by appointment, you could appoint a CSAC member without necessarily that person being identified in that.
Usually you do.
No, I know, but I'm just saying to get started, because we could always amend later on.
Right, but usually it's identified as a member of this group, because this way, going forward, you'll continue to appoint those members from those groups.
So do we want to say of the 5 residents, 1 is a member of CSAC?
Yeah.
Is that fair? And then at least we can get started in this regard, and we can always amend down the road if we see a need to do that. And then at least we get, once we have that resolution, we can then begin the process of taking in applications and appointing
Correct.
members, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So Councilman Hache is going to work on a mission statement, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the planning board, and you're not going to do that at this time?
I think we should just keep it the
Start
way
here?
it's identified here
Okay.
with the one CSAC person,
Okay.
just to get this rolling at this point.
Okay.
Okay. Is that, as long as everyone else is good with that?
Are we going to, just a question, and a little concern about this, is the parking. Is that going to be part of this or not? This particular, and the reason I'm concerned about it is I certainly don't want this to be buried. And I know and it may take time to put this, and I'm not saying it would, but this is one of the things that's got to be front and center. And so if it's part of this committee, it's got to be like priority number 1.
No, that's exactly what I was introducing as, is really the first order of business for these guys is going to be the parking.
Good, thank you.
'Cause you can't have the vibrancy and the health of the downtown without having a discussion about parking, so.
Got it, okay.
Right, and I wouldn't envision the committee as competing really, or trying to even put together events right off the bat. I would see it more as like an improvement committee. So, do you want to repave the streets, and how would you fund that? Or you want to build some sort of parking structure, and then, what would that entail? Or you want to replace tree wells or lighting and do all these different things, so they could come up with ideas and then figure out how we could fund it and stuff like that, versus putting on like a car show or movies in the park or something like that. We could leave that to, we'd leave the events and everything in the chamber and the guild, which they do so well, and this would be more of a committee to basically fund improvements downtown. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning it. I think that's, yeah, okay.
So I'm excited. I think it's really a great opportunity. I think it's going to be wonderful. Okay. So moving on to budget items, the first couple of items have to do with police purchases. So I just want to be clear from our village attorney that there's no conflict of interest on my part with that, and the fire department as their budget items.
Yeah, ahead of time, Susan asked me, she was concerned about it, and from a standpoint of her interest in this, she's allowed to vote on budget items concerning the police department. This is part of that, so she is certainly clear, and there isn't any conflict of interest.
Great, thank you. So let's
Okay,
move on.
Okay, so we have 22 items under budget. I'm going to try to move through some of them a little quicker. Some of them I think are simpler. But we do have some biggies. We have a discussion of the annual audit. We have a discussion of quarterly financial reports and the bond council RFQ. So I think those are the meaty ones here, but I'll go through these as quickly as we can unless you have questions. Okay, like purchase a bulletproof vest. This is, the resolution to purchase 6 point-blank level 3A bulletproof vests. It will be funded by grants and or capital.
Any questions? Anyone? Okay.
Purchase of portable radios. Again, this has been in the budget. It'll be used. We have a capital account for it. And this is to back up the radio supplies that we have. Our PEOs are using everybody else's radios, so.
So just a stupid question. Do we
Sure.
typically get quotes on these, or is it just we go to one vendor? How does that work?
I think this is a state, this is a state contract.
It is? Okay,
Yeah,
so
this
we
is under
go
state
through
contract. So we don't, we didn't, I
selected
don't think
vendor?
we got quotes on this. It's under state contract. Right.
Okay, all right.
Okay, any questions? Any other?
Nope.
Okay, so this is I know when we took the tour, you guys heard about this a little bit, a couple of you, but this is the continued upgrade of our police fleet. So this is the purchase of 4 more SUVs. If you recall, during the budget, the request was for 6. We cut it back to 4. So this is just using the capital that we've already approved.
So a couple questions on this. It says here you're going to re-outfit one of the cars, car 16. What does that mean, and how much does that cost? Do you know?
We're outfitting these cars with either existing stuff that we have, or we're purchasing.
Re-outfitted. There's a re-outfitted thing here in this particular quote at the bottom. It says re-outfitted one car 16.
It's for parking enforcement?
Oh, this car, which was previously a police car, is going to go to the Parking Enforcement Division.
Right.
Where it will replace a previous car. And re-outfit, I think, means to take out most of the equipment that's in it that the police use.
So it doesn't mean adding anything, there's no additional cost associated with this, is that correct?
Jackie,
Yeah.
I don't believe so either.
Okay.
But all the costs that are here are for this whole package.
Yeah, so the other question I have is, if you look at the second page, it has 4 police interceptors not to exceed $155,000, and the front page says $213,000. So why is that?
Purchase with
Second page is 155, and the front page says 213. What's the diff, and why is it over?
Because I think the one, and Jackie, maybe you can help me here, Bob, I think the 213 exceedance also is the secondary equipment that's going into those cars. The base cars are 155.
Okay. So this, obviously, this is all part of the budget, yes?
Yes. It
Okay.
was approved during capital.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Maybe Jackie could help with this.
Don't go anywhere, Jackie.
Don't go anywhere.
Come on back. Chief.
Chief.
Chief Jackie.
So I have a quick question. So why are we going with the utility vehicles and not the regular Interceptor? Why are we moving up to all utility vehicles, or what appears to be?
All the SUVs
Yeah.
instead of regular cars?
Yeah.
Part of that is because of going into the capital budget, they last longer, and most agencies are now making that transition. They are bigger, we can put better equipment into it and secure it in a different manner, and they get a longer life out of them.
So do we have a list of our police fleet? Do we have a grid of the police fleet so that we can see the lifespan that we're
Sure,
using?
we could do that. We can get that to you separately. I mean, what Jackie was saying is also, and this is kind of bizarre, but it's municipality kind of law, the sedans have to be expensed. These can go into capital. So from a cost perspective, these work better for us. So I think that was your first
Exactly.
And we have a list of all vehicles. We can certainly provide that.
And I would think from a practical sense, I mean, our winters aren't getting any milder. I mean,
That's what I was just going to add.
Yeah.
Between the flooding issues that we have here and the snow, the SUVs just make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And we had a list, an ongoing list of the vehicles. We had an inventory. So it should
Absolutely.
be easy enough to
Yeah, no, we
generate
have a
that.
list. We could
Right.
just run off a list. And we have a list of all of our vehicles and all of our equipment, so.
Yeah. So if maybe the new council members could have that list.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for Jackie? Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Let me just write that down. Okay, so the next one is C4. This is Jim Van Gore's vehicle. He's sitting right there. All right, so this was in budget. This is a 2016 Chevy Tahoe to replace a 1998 Chevy Tahoe, $44,900. His 2010, he has a 2010 right now, is going to go to the fire inspectors, and the other is going to go into we're going to auction it off.
So, just a stupid question on this. Why do we have a 1998 Chevy Tahoe still in service?
Yeah, I mean-
And we must have a policy now moving forward that says, okay, when a car is X miles or X years old, that we decide to put it out to pasture.
Well, I mean, I think we have tried over the last couple of years to rejuvenate the fleet. And we had a lot of old vehicles, and we still have some old vehicles, and you can't just simply turn them over overnight. The ideal would be to be able to turn over your vehicles every 3 years and maybe even sell them back, and that's kind of a longer-term view. So we do have some old cars that we're trying to...
So do we have any policy moving forward as to, we must, no? As to
we
what
don't really have a policy, but once we get, I think it's a good idea to have maybe a basic policy, and once fleet is functioning under our new DPW person, we could look at that. But what we're trying to do is we actually sit around a table and go through everybody's vehicles, and we sit there and figure out as a team which ones we should replace.
Well,
based on
I
age
just think
and
it's kind of scary that we have a 1998 Chevy
We have
Tahoe,
older
and it's
we have
probably
older
got
cars than-
hundreds of thousands of miles on it, too.
It probably doesn't have hundreds of thousands.
No?
They don't really pull that much mileage, no.
Does it work, Jim? Yeah, it's got 78,000 miles. Oh, it does, okay.
We have older vehicles than this.
About the police car with the hole in the
So, we're working on it. You have to, there's just, I don't have to say this to you, there's just so much capital that we can spend every year.
Yeah.
You know?
Is it worth thinking about moving forward some kind of policy on ages of vehicles and mileage that we just, I don't know.
I don't know.
Just a thought.
I think you take it on a case-by-case vehicle, because if you have a vehicle, I would imagine that that's the best approach, but...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, C5, talk about old. This is a resolution to upgrade, you okay?
Yep.
Voicemail and customer service software. So if you get voicemails at the village, you'll notice that the time is always wrong by an hour, and we can't fix it, just as an aside. So this is outdated, non-supportable software that we have, and Dylan tells me, Dylan's there. Dylan tells me if it goes down, it's going to be very hard to get back up again, if not impossible. So this is just to replace that. And that's in the budget, and we've planned on this for the last year.
So do we have quotes on this? We just have one vendor? How does that work?
It was, again, under state contract. This is Excel.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
The next one is also to Excel, and it's a resolution to award the maintenance and emergency troubleshooting services to Excel. This will be the second year that we're using that firm in a row. Just FYI, if you're interested, we use them on an as-needed basis. They're really good. They're really reasonably priced. And last year, we spent $1,870 with them. So as I said, we use it on an as-needed basis, and Dylan indicates to me that when they're here, because he does a lot of the fix-its himself, but when they come, they'll also tell him how to fix it if the problem happens again. So I think that's good also. So that's
Great.
C6. Okay.
Just curious, how many hours are spent doing this kind of stuff? I know we're being charged on an hourly basis, but I had no feel for, you said it was like 10, 15 hours a year? Or
It's
what is it?
$1,870 is what it cost us for all of last year. So that includes labor, and it could include
So it's like, that's like
things.
15 hours or
Yeah,
something?
it's not,
Yeah?
yeah.
Okay, and so this is not going to be something that they're going to spend 3,000 hours on this year to...
No, it's not
No,
anticipated.
okay, so,
that will-
all right, so it's going to be, all
Yeah,
right.
that's the reason I gave you last year's number, because just to give you an idea of...
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Okay, so the next one is pretty easy. It's a resolution to reject every bid that the bids that we got on property maintenance services, and we're going to have to go out and look at this again. So
Which one is that?
we are 9C7.
C7.
C7.
Okay.
All right, this is property service to the property maintenance service if we have a property that has 14 inches of grass and either the owner is not there or they refuse to comply. We would, in fact, use a service like this to take care of it, or if there's snow or whatever. But they came back not seeming to understand it, so we rejected all the bids yesterday. Okay, C8. This is, we do this yearly. This is snow plowing services from November through May. We're recommending that we award this to Conquest, the lowest bidder. We have used them for 6 years in this capacity.
So I just have a crazy thought here. I don't know if you would consider this. I don't know how much time they spend on an hourly basis. They charge us per hour, but, I mean, they could be sitting in there, and they probably don't, but they could be sitting in the truck for 3 hours and bill us. So is there any way we can get these people to bid on a per-job basis as opposed to charging an hourly rate? So if they look at, what we do here, they can give us, and so we can get bids that way as opposed to them charging up on an hourly basis. Is that something that's reasonable?
Let me just go back a second. They're just not off there doing their own thing because, we have people that are monitoring and managing them throughout this whole process. So it's not like we don't know where they are or what they're doing.
Oh, no, I understand, but that's also costing us money to watch them. My suggestion is let's have them charge them on a per-job basis, and then, we could potentially save some money here.
I would imagine that would be difficult because you don't know what the weather conditions.
You don't know if it's 2 feet of snow, 1 foot of snow.
You don't know the storm, you don't know on an event, if you have a weather event.
Well, no, I'm saying if they're going to plow this parking lot here, they say, okay, we're going to charge you $100 to do that, okay, and that's it. So when those things come up, it's $100 versus it's going to, they take 4 hours doing it.
Yeah, but you don't know if the parking lot is covered with 2 feet of snow or 4 feet of snow, so nobody's going to say, I'll do it for $100 because
But it really doesn't matter whether it's 2 feet, whether it's 2 inches or 10 inches. It's going to be the same, the work, if they have a truck like that. So my thought is...
I don't think so. But go ahead.
My thought is a per-job basis. I don't know.
I don't know if Rich and or Chris want to comment on that both of them are, huh?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We bid out snow plowing on an hourly basis. Snow varies from snowfall to snowfall. It varies in intensity. It varies in moisture content. We oftentimes start our winter fleet with a certain number of trucks, and then during a long duration storm, we may have breakdowns. If we have a breakdown, we want to have the ability to call the contractor and say, add another truck. To your question as to who monitors it, the assistant engineer supervises the contractor's snow plowing. He drives around, makes sure they are working, and he also has a plow truck. Each contract employee is assigned a quadrant of the village. We have the village divided up, I think, into 28 or 32 quadrants that are assigned individuals, either individuals from our staff, whether they're from the street division, water pollution, traffic signal, or water department employees, they get assigned an area. Same thing with the contractor's employees. Some years we've had the contractor work on the west side in the more hilly sections. Some years we switch them over and have them work in the flatter sections on the east side from here, say, towards Paramus.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just another way to look at it.
The questions are always good.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. So this is, well, the next couple are Ridgewood Water, I think, or we could skip a couple and just do, maybe I'll have Rich come up and I'll start. But the first one is C9, which is a recommendation to award professional engineering services to well rehabilitation study. This is to the lowest bidder and consists of evaluating 8 wells that are currently under service to determine what rehabilitation is needed. So ultimately, the goal here is to increase systems capacity. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Rich, but...
I could add to it. The 8 wells in total account for over about 3 million gallons a day of water that we're not getting into the system. So this project's critical for us to undertake to determine if we can rehabilitate those wells, and if not, there's an opportunity to drill new wells somewhere else to replace that lost gallonage. Many of the wells have been out of service for decades. They range from different types of contaminant issues or mechanical issues. So in some cases, we may find out that there's no way to rehabilitate it and we have no other choice but to find a new location and drill a well. So this study is to take that first step, look at the 8 locations, do a feasibility analysis, determine, what the options are, some cost of benefit to those, and then determine where we're going to go with each of the locations. 3 of the 8 are under our administrative order with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, so we have no choice in those but to move forward. The other 5 have just been on the books as inactive for, an amount of time that we need to take action at this point.
Rich, how long have they been out of service?
They vary. One well in particular, I'm told, has been out of service since the 80s.
Really?
Yep.
And so if we had this 3 million extra gallons per day, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. We wouldn't have any water restrictions?
That's a good point, yes.
Yeah, is that right?
Yep.
It's possible.
Possible, yeah.
But, during normal season, we're 4 to 5 million gallons a day. We've peaked at 16 million gallons with watering. So $3 million is like a drop in the bucket. You get it?
3 million. It's a very big bucket.
Municipal humor.
Big drop.
It's municipal humor again.
That was municipal humor.
Okay. Any questions for Rich on that one?
Just curious, Rich, how many wells are operational right now?
Right now it's 47 out of 55.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next one, Rich, is to award to Leggett the hydrogeologic consulting services, so you might want to...
Yeah, and this one, the 2 go hand in hand. The first one, number 9 was the engineering study, and number 10 is to award the services for a hydrogeological engineer to do the actual on-the-ground work that would be necessary to decide where the new wells may go or what type of rehabilitation needs to be made on the existing wells. In some cases, you can clean out these wells, remove the mineral deposits that have accumulated over time, and bring back the yield that they once had. In other cases, you cannot do that. So this expert would provide that type of consulting to the team, to help with the feasibility study and actual layout, the specs for that work in the future.
So, Rich, just another question, just in general on the wells. We're not in any risk of any of the other wells going down here, of the 47 that are operational right now?
This is something I try to talk about in all my conservation talks. If anybody owns a business, they would have respect for this. Every summer, we're running everything. Who runs a business with everything on? Something's bound to go wrong. So out of the 47 that are active, tomorrow, one of the 47, 2 of the 47 or more can have a mechanical problem, or they could have a fault in the well. So, we need to take action now and be proactive for the future instead of being so reactive. We're reactive and putting out fires daily just to make sure those 47 stay on. But at any given day, there's a chance that some new contaminant could be introduced. Power could go down, a tree could fall on the building, it could get flooded. So we run that risk without any redundancy. So these 2 projects are very important for us to get to that point.
So, as Susan and Michael know, when we went through the budget process, we put a big spotlight on water for this very reason, because for many, many years, for whatever reason, the infrastructure wasn't adequately financed and funded. And this is why we have a 4 or 5 year or more capital plan of $40+ million to take care of this. And so part of what you're seeing here is part of that capital plan. So I'm going to skip 11. I'm going to just go do the water one since Rich is up here. So we'll skip 11 and come back to it. Is that all right? 12, oh, my favorite. Robert's Electric Company, the final change to this.
Well,
right?
And this is a good example relative to Mr. Voigt's question. The work that you're seeing here and the numbers that were spent is all electrical work that was done as emergency repairs at our facilities. We had several facilities go down, and there's these variable frequency drives that control the pumps. Without them, the pumps are not running efficiently, and at times they can't run at all. So to bring in an electrician, to do that work and then buy that equipment, which is very expensive, was the result of this overage, and a lot of it was emergency work. So we're closing that contract because we've, exceeded it, and we actually rebid it, and we took new bids in, and at your September meeting or August meeting, you'll be seeing a resolution to approve a new contract for the same service.
So, Rich, why were we so far off on this? I mean, this is not only double, or it's close to doubling what we, what went wrong here? Or what could we do better next time? So we can anticipate.
We could plan better for the future and get ahead of things falling apart and provide redundancy. In a lot of the facilities, there is just one control. There may just be one pump. In those facilities, we need to have more than one. We need to have a backup.
Do you have some pumps that are kind of at risk of kind of falling apart, and that you could identify that we would maybe know moving forward that we got to put some money aside for them?
That's part of the plan. Outside of the 6-year plan we presented to the council as part of this year's budget, we have a 10-year capital plan that goes into a little bit more detail of each facility. The engineers actually went and inventoried each facility, took a snapshot of what equipment was there, what needs to be done. So that's part of the plan as well. We're very good at maintaining things, but with our staff, we can't get to every location all the time. So we have to rely on an outside electrician, and outside other specialists.
So you're saying that the plan you're putting together, say for next year, this probably be part of it is a kind of a contingency plan within the plan?
It's already in motions. We're under design to put backup power at about 12 locations where we have no generators currently, that we have to wheel up a generator borrowed from some other utility or from the sewer division in-house, and when the power goes out. So we're slowly getting there, but it's going to take a lot of time for us to get there, because these projects are big. They're big undertakings. Some of this electrical work occurred over 6 months. It wasn't just a day's worth of repairs like it would be in your home. It's equipment that, you have to order. It's special. It takes time to get delivered. Once it's there, it takes weeks sometimes to put it all together. They're computer systems. They have a lot of electrical, high voltage components to them. When those go out, a lot of times they're special order and not something off the shelf.
So part of this, there's a two-pronged effort, or probably more than two-pronged, but this whole idea of getting ahead of stuff is not just getting ahead on the infrastructure where we've been behind and thinking through this, it's also getting ahead with the EPA and DEP. Because what we were finding was clearly, and we've met with them several times, we've gone down to Trenton to meet with them, is that we were reactive. We weren't ahead of the curve, so we were always reacting to them as opposed to kind of thinking forward. And I'm not saying we're there yet, but we're making progress in getting to that point, and this capital plan goes a long way, and all the thought and planning into this goes a long way in moving that infrastructure forward. And we'll stop things like having failures that cause us to have to spend money that we didn't originally plan
So just a stupid question, Rich. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, is that your go-to agency, or do you deal with the national level?
We're on both levels.
You do?
Yes. It depends on what the project is, what criteria are up against. But at the moment, we're dealing with both representatives from the state level and the federal level.
Okay. Is any one of them more helpful than the other, or?
No, they've both been very helpful. What Roberta's alluding to, one of the first things we did when I started here was a year ago, we went and met with all of them face to face. And just starting that communication was key. And I think over the time we've built up, I'd hope some respect from them and trust, that maybe we didn't have before. And as a result, the letters and fines are not coming. Not to say that it could happen, because there's a lot on our plate, but, we've been good for about a year, and we're keeping up. I provide them quarterly reports, sometimes give them photographic evidence. They do come and do inspections, so we're keeping
Are they
up.
helping with you are they helping you with particulates like PFOA and PFOS?
To an extent. In some cases, we may
that
know
seems
more.
to be an issue. We can probably talk about that. I don't know, Bernie, I don't know if you wanted to that was one of the things you wanted to talk about.
Well, I could
But-
just let you know, I think we're going to allude to it later, but as part of the consumer confidence reports that went out to all the consumers in all 4 towns, we felt it was best, Roberta and I sat down, that we hold a couple open public forums to invite residents from all 4 communities to come here both the day and evening session, where we'll actually run through the confidence report and then answer any questions they have.
Yeah, so that's in my manager's report, but that makes it shorter. My manager's
Yeah.
report just...
So you have shut down several wells because of that issue, and we need to figure that out.
Well, no, not for that issue.
No?
No.
I thought you said you had.
We did have a system that was shut down for about a month, but retested and found we were way below the level.
Yeah, how did you, did you, just
Yes.
because you just retested, or did you mix the water?
No, we retested.
Okay, good.
And we're monitoring on a monthly basis now.
All right, thank you.
Well,
So just a quick question on that. All of these items are in multiple municipalities, not just Ridgewood?
correct. Yes.
Yeah.
It's for the entire system.
So should I go on to C13?
Yeah,
Yeah.
move on.
Okay, so this is just a bid rejection of orthopolyphosphate.
Yeah, this is the chemical, it's a food-grade chemical that we add to the water. We've been adding it for, I guess, about a year, well, actually more than a year. We started a pilot project a couple years ago, but it's in the entire system now. And this is our corrosion control additive. This prevents the leaching of lead from the service lines and piping in people's homes. So it's a very important chemical to add to the system. It literally coats the pipes and prevents that leaching. We put out a bid twice in an attempt to get the required chemical we needed. The first bid, there was no responders. The second bid, we had 2 responders, and it was incomplete. One didn't meet our specifications. The other one didn't provide all the necessary documentation. So at this point, in accordance with the law, we can now negotiate a contract, which I think will help us, will be to our benefit.
Yes.
You know,
When you say negotiate a contract, what does that mean?
well, at this point, we could put out a negotiations package.
Okay.
We have to put out to the 2 bidders. We could specify in there what our requirements are. They could decide to enter in negotiation with us or not. If they both don't, we can move on to another vendor, you know, and try to get to terms that will meet what our requirement is in terms of the chemical. And in this case, the sticking point was really delivery. You know, we're trying to get this chemical delivered to the points where we need it. Right now, it all gets delivered to one location, then we literally have to take it out in trucks to the 47 wells on a weekly basis. So it takes a lot of time and money.
So, okay. So let me ask a question. Do we think, rather than go through the rest of these items, we skip them, go to Bernie's Ridgewood water thing, since Rich is here, and do that as well as the shared service, and then go back up? Or do you want, it seems to me, since we're on the topic.
Yeah, makes sense.
Rich is here, so let's...
Yeah, makes sense, okay.
Thank you.
Right to that.
Okay,
All right, so this is the mystery topic. I wasn't sure what you
No mystery.
So Councilwoman Walsh?
So, during the campaign, when, before the 3 of us were elected, the question had come up about Ridgewood Water. Would we be interested in selling it, keeping it? And at that time, I was the only person that thought of considering possibly selling Ridgewood Water. As we have gone through, I mean, when I was on the council, it came up many times, Ridgewood Water. Just today, we've approved $471,000, you know, $500,000 in Ridgewood Water bids. So I guess the bigger conversation and what I'm going to propose to my fellow council members is that we are actually the board of directors of Ridgewood Water. And we have, you know, a fiduciary to all the other municipalities. We are actually, unfortunately, still in a lawsuit with these other municipalities. And I think that it would go a long way for us to act as the board of directors when we deal with Ridgewood Water items. So I'm going to propose, maybe for the short term, maybe for the long term, that whenever we have Ridgewood Water items on the agenda, that we have it as a special agenda, so that the only items on that agenda that we can then send to these other municipalities would be Ridgewood Water items. Because, for instance, I don't know that they're aware that we're spending $500,000 tonight on Ridgewood Water items. I think it would go a long way in terms of, you know, kinship between the communities. Might be an easy way to put it. I actually, during the campaign and over the years, have talked to different members of councils in these other municipalities, and there's a lot of misinformation that they have.
Absolutely.
I can speculate why they get the misinformation, but they think that we're, the wicked evil water company. So I think it would help us going forward to really show them that this is Ridgewood Water. This is, again, I'm proposing that we put them on a special agenda whenever they come up, and we could, switch back and forth easily as the board of directors of Ridgewood Water. And I think it would be clear to these municipalities and to the other ratepayers how we operate Ridgewood Water.
So I think Rich and I are in total agreement that, in fact, the relationship between us and the 3 other municipalities was not the best. I could give you a ton of reasons why we think that's the case. I'm not sure I want to do that at this moment. But we have made an attempt to strengthen those relationships and have a transparent relationship with them. And what we've done is we've set up quarterly or every 2-month meetings with them, and we're using conservation as the linchpin for those meetings. And the reason, and our full intent, was to take them through capital budgets, take them through expense budgets, and do all that stuff. But we have been cautioned to do that until after past the litigation. So what we've been focusing on with them has been conservation. And we spent a lot of time with them. Rich and I were in Glen Rock. Rich went to Wyckoff.
Midland Park.
Midland Park. And we've been spending more time with them and having communications with them, and that's been going on for the last year. And I think if you spoke to them now, particularly Glen Rock, would feel a bunch different than they felt before. And as he said, the forums that we're doing at the end of the month and to the beginning of August, we've invited all 4 of us together. So I applaud it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad idea to have separate meeting on Ridgewood Water and take it out of the agenda and have it just a separate, but that means every week we would, because we have Ridgewood Water items every work session. So we should think about how we want to choreograph.
But I think that's exactly that's exactly the point, that we have, $500,000, I'm just saying tonight is $500,000. If next week's $500,000 and then the next week's $500,000, your $40 million budget is now, $1.5 million short. You know what I mean? So, and I think that transparency would be helpful in maybe even.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that point about being short. We're not short.
No. What I'm saying is you're going to be doing $40 million in infrastructure changes, and right now we have $471,000 that really play into that infrastructure change.
It does,
so
right.
so I feel strongly that it should be started right away, even though we are still in the litigation, because it really, I think, would...
So Bernie, I want to make sure I understand the purpose. The purpose is to make sure that they can find the issue, or that we're dealing with it. Help me understand what the...
No, so the purpose is that, and I hate to use the word transparency, that the ratepayers are clear on our business operations of Ridgewood Water. And by having a separate agenda as the board of directors of Ridgewood Water, they're going to see it each time, and it's going to be separate, so that they're not going to have to sit in the meeting and go through line by line and line, wait until it gets to the item here.
Yeah.
It'll be in a separate agenda. They'll know it. They can attend if they want, or they will have the outcome with these items, and it'll be very clear to them, as opposed to being buried, and I hate to use the word buried too, in all these other things that are really important for us, but a Ridgewood Water line item is clearly more important to them than it is to all the other things.
All right, just so to understand it, so would you, it wouldn't be like, we have parking policy, budget, it wouldn't be something like water and then everything's on water, or would you want to do that? Or would you want to do something like we suspend this work session and go into another specific Ridgewood, but at the same night? So if we have all water stuff on, then we could just have a separate agenda in the state, so we wouldn't need another night of meetings or anything like that. We could just kind of lump everything together. So if the other towns do want to come by and see what we're doing and what Ridgewood Water's doing, they'd be able to do that.
Correct. Okay.
So but on a work session, just because I think this is a great idea, I think it's terrific. But on a work session, we could just have a separate section for the water, And then on our public meeting, that's where we would go into a special public meeting to approve that. Does that make more sense so that we and I think it just keeps everything cleaner in
I
how
would
we,
prefer them to be separate, only because...
even on the work session.
Yeah, and as Mike, the deputy mayor had mentioned, you could put it in the section, either at the bottom or at the beginning of the meeting, do those items, and then...
So we're going to, we would then be suspending or adjourning one work session and then going into a second.
Leave it to the end.
Right, and then we would
Or put it at the beginning.
adjourn one, go into a new work session, then adjourn that, and then we're done, and then we would have.
Susan, I don't know that, I know you want to make the separation. I don't think you need to adjourn one work session to go into another work session.
That's what I'm saying, why can't it just be on the same work session?
You could, it's the same work session, basically, because you're discussing it. But I'm just saying it'd be redundant, but separating it, certainly. But the issue, you don't have to, legally, you don't have to go from one work session into another.
So in other words, we would just have this, our regular agenda, and we would have a new section. I think just a section for water, that's, I think was my.
I think that's what.
But then when you're approving, you would want to go into a separate public meeting, a special public meeting. That works?
Well, I mean, we can talk about it, but it's still the same. If you're in a public meeting, say next Wednesday, we have a public meeting, and you're going to take action, because that's what it allows you to do. It's still the same public meeting. You can have the separation, you can deal with the water agenda separately, but you don't have to jump from one public meeting to the same public meeting or to a new public meeting.
But I think to Bernadette's point, I think she's speaking to, and you can
do it
correct
as a
me. You
formality.
can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Bernadette is suggesting is that there's a public meeting for Village Council, and then there's a second public meeting for the Board of Directors for the water.
But it can all be covered under the same. Otherwise, I think, I'd have to talk to Heather, but you might have to put out new notice and everything else and double the work on it.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that I think once you open the public meeting, you can have an announcement as you go through the separate water utility agenda, and have an announcement that we're now, as the Board of Directors of the water utility, we're going to do it this way and that way. It saves it saves the clerk a lot of time. And it's not required, so.
But I think it would be good, because then when Heather is preparing the agenda for public notice, they would see it on there. They would specifically see it on there.
You may even want to do something.
Again, it's just so that they are aware that the topic is.
And you may even want to float to the administrators in each of the other three communities that agenda, so they can do with what they want.
Yeah, they can do with it what they want, but we would be more proactive in terms of, Ridgewood Water's on tonight, so tomorrow, they would know, and they could act on it accordingly, or they could,
Yep.
It's a great idea, too, because I think it just kind of cleans up our own agenda in a way that it separates that out, so I love it. Thank you.
It's such a big issue, and it's such a big, topic, and it's kind of spread out in budget and operations sometimes, so to kind of put everything together. And Rich might be happier if we did it in the beginning of the meeting.
I was going to say, even though it begins with a W, put it in the beginning.
Well, Rich, you live really close to here, so it's not really an issue.
Yeah. Watch the meeting until
concerned about the other
in.
So Bob is an hour away. Bob is an hour,
Just
over
kidding.
an hour away. He's 10 minutes away, so he'll be at the end.
But then if anybody from the other towns wanted to
Doesn't
come,
matter.
If anybody from the other towns, they could come at the beginning,
they could come in the beginning of the meeting, see all the water stuff, and then they can skedaddle if they don't want to sit around and watch us approve, topics and things like that.
So we'll split it out. It'll be clearer.
Right.
That's fine. And we have one more water thing. Actually, when you think about it, when Bob comes up here to talk about the numbers, water is in those numbers, so we'll have to think about how to also reflect that. But shared services, this is D2. So this is just a interlocal services agreement for bulk purchases for Hawthorne Water. It's also being sent to the Hawthorne Borough Council for their approval. And I don't know if you want to talk about the bulk purchase, but it's pretty clear.
Well, I mean, with the demand we have in the summer, we've been buying more and more water. Just for example, with Hawthorne, in 2014, we bought 24 million gallons of water. Last year, that tripled. We bought 72 million gallons of water. So putting that all in a formalized agreement is important. because without the agreement, DEP will not recognize that purchase. So legally, we have to be covered with them, and it helps with our allocation and firm capacity for our system, because the agreement sets in stone that we're buying that amount of water, and it adds it to our system officially so that they recognize it and make it part of everything else that they monitor and do for us.
So does Hawthorne have a significant surplus of water that they can, we can buy it from them? Yes?
Yeah, they always did it. As a result of a lot of industry that moved out of Hawthorne, they suddenly had this surplus. I don't know if we approached them or they approached us. It's been some time since the original agreement was in place, but I know that was the reason why they approached us. We're paying a bulk rate. We're paying a lot less than what they charge their retail customers, their residents, because we buy so much. And every year the rate will just go up by any standard percentage that they raise, their local rate.
So again, a stupid question. I mean, if they have a surplus and we can buy almost as much as we want, I'm guessing, why do we have water restrictions?
Right now, we're probably taking as much as they could give us, because they could only give us so much. We're taking that surplus. When we try to take more, they call us up on the phone and say, don't take any more, because they have the same demand we have in the summer. They're getting the same lawn watering, and plus the infrastructure that they have on their side of the interconnection and ours is limiting as well. That's another project we're undertaking, is to reconstruct that interconnection.
And we also have capacity limitations from the DEP with regard to the wells.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's why we have to do that.
Yeah, there's limits on what you can take.
Another stupid question. I mean, we buy water from other places, like over in Oradell and Suez. And how much do we buy from them?
We buy 3 to 4 million gallons a day from them. It's much larger.
We do?
We utilize 2 interconnections with Suez.
And can we buy more?
We have an agreement that has the ability to take a little bit more, but again, it's the same instance where when we want to take it, they are under the same limitations, where they're getting the usage on their side of it and sometimes can't give it to us. And again, the infrastructure is limiting as well. And that's another location or 2 locations where we're looking to rebuild. Now, we're also exploring as part of the budget, this is part of the presentation as well, a third opportunity with Passaic Valley Water Commission. But that's going to take a lot of feasibility and understanding, particularly in regard to the whole Flint, Michigan issue. We don't want to take just any other water source without evaluating, what effects it will have mixing with our water, where we could take it from, what the price will be. So that again will take time, but there is always the availability to get another source from another purchaser.
Any thoughts as to how much we can buy from them? Or are we going to?
Don't know.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Any more questions for Rich?
Well, it's the year water. We're blue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Okay, I think, so we're back to 9C11, I think, right?
11, yep.
Yeah, so this is, actually, Chris can come up and talk to this. This is installation of ultraviolet at the water pollution control facility, so that we don't use what I call chlorine anymore, but this is the other side of water.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, now we're talking about the end of the pipe. All has to go somewhere. We treat it at the somewhere. What we're looking at water pollution as part of, let me step back a little bit. When we created the Villages Sustainable Energy Project and we put out an RFP for it, part of the RFP had a component of installing an ultraviolet disinfection system for our effluent pipe, for our discharge that goes into the Hocus Brook. We're now moving to doing that, and the Sustainable Energy Project had our partner installing the UV system, not at taxpayer expense. We would be renting it every year for about the cost of the chemicals we currently use to disinfect. That's sodium hypochlorite and sodium bisulfate for dechlorination. Those are the chemicals we're required to use by DEP. Part of what our partner, NSU, had done is they looked, when they bid the job, they looked at our plans for our plant. We last had an upgrade of the plant that was finished in 2005. It was about $17–18 million. A lot of that, unfortunately, is wearing out. When they looked at the plans, that's what they used for their bid. When they got on site and started doing their design work for our UV system, a number of anomalies came up. They found that our plant operates not consistent with our drawings. It operates to meet our permit limits due to the skill of the plant staff, the former superintendent Bob Gillow, current superintendent John Sperber, Yagnish Voss, the lab manager, and the operators. We make it work. We hit permit limits. It just doesn't work according to the engineer drawings. The proposal before you is for a study by NSU to be able to install and convert our disinfection system to UV, ultraviolet light.
Great. It's that simple.
What's the benefit?
The benefit is, I think down the road, we're going to be required to do this. A lot of wastewater treatment plants, for example, Northwest Bergen, right up here in Waldwick, their discharge goes through ultraviolet disinfection. They're a larger plant than us. They generally are 3 times the daily discharge that we are. Other plants are also being told to convert. I'd like to be a little ahead of the curve and not have to come to you folks for a large chunk of capital after getting a order from the DEP to go to UV disinfection. This is not going to be a rapid process. It's going to be a several-year process. And what's also concerning me is we renewed the plant operating permit last April. It was approved last July. I still haven't gotten the new operating permit from DEP. And the concern there is the new operating permit, if and when I get it, may have additional treatment requirements. It may have additional testing requirements. That's the unknown that we face.
So just for grins, what is this going to cost us to buy one of these suckers?
The UV?
Yeah.
The UV is going to be between $500,000 and $1 million, and we're not buying it. NSU is.
We're leasing it, renting it? What are we doing?
NSU is going to install it if everything works out well. We have an agreement that we pay them $60,000 a year, which is basically what we currently spend on disinfection chemical. And because they make a lot of power when everything's running right at the plant, we buy that power, and that's their revenue stream also.
Okay, thank you.
But this also goes back, Jeff, to the conversation we were having with the FAC on looking at the business model at water pollution control.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a piece of that.
Thanks.
And I guess another benefit would be we don't have to handle chemicals. We don't have to deal with storage issues or anything like that.
Yes, the chemicals are, sodium hypochlorite is not as bad as pure chlorine. Pure chlorine is a gaseous compound. That's an EHS, an extremely hazardous substance. For those who are history buffs, it was used in World War I to kill people. It's very good at that. Plants used to use it in 1-ton cylinders. I've done work on plants in prior jobs where you have to do the dispersion modeling. If you have a leak, it's pretty bad. So a lot of plants had to get rid of that and go to the sodium hypochlorite, which is basically a strong bleach compound. It is safer. If it is splashed on you, it does burn. It is a caustic. No denying that.
This makes the water cleaner, right? The UV versus the chlorination, or no?
No, it disinfects. The intent is to kill the viruses, bacteria, and pathogens to meet our discharge limits.
Okay.
Okay? Great. Good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just interesting stuff. Okay, C14, this is just a resolution to refund excess application fees. We talked about escrow before.
Right, escrow.
Yeah, C15, this is again releasing a bond as the project with Clear Wireless has been done. Okay, and so now I'm going to call Bob up because now we're starting the other meaty parts of the agenda. The first one being the 2015 Audit and Corrective Action Plan, which I think Heather got to you earlier. Bound book.
Good evening. What I'd like to do before we go into the resolutions is to give you a little history as to what transpired over the last couple of years with the annual audit. So the 2013 audit was not received until December 2014. So with that being said, recommendations that were required could not be addressed due to the lateness. So in addition to that, the recommendations that were offered weren't very substantive. In early 2015, the village decided to go and put out to bid for a new auditor. With that being said, they awarded a contract to Nissa Vashi, our current auditors, to conduct the 2014 and 2015 audit. The audit for 14 was scheduled to start in May of 14, which time Bud Jones, the partner, Roberta, and I met with the firm and decided on a planning phase, during the planning phase, decided on a course of action that we requested them to take when they did the audit. We wanted them to look at everything thoroughly, in depth, because we felt in the last several years there has really not been something that we could get that was substantive that would help us in our internal controls. During the course of the audit, they identified the fact that we did not have, or we were not presenting to them, our fixed assets appropriately. We weren't accounting for the transactions as occurred in the last 3 years, in which case they were going to give us a qualified opinion, which rating agencies don't look very positive on. So I took it upon myself to say, I can address this, I can alleviate it, I'll get it done, we'll get rid of this qualification. I was successful in presenting to them the transactions as they occurred, the documentation that was required, so we got rid of the qualification. With that being said, when we were finished with the audit, we wound up with numerous findings and recommendations. After working our way through them and consolidating some of them, they were presented as 18 recommendations for the 2014 audit. Again, because of the delay of this, getting rid of the qualification, their audit wasn't presented until September of 14, or 15, rather, I'm sorry, which gave us not enough time to really implement recommendation or corrective action to the recommendations they presented. In addition, based upon the findings that they presented, we asked Bud Jones to go in and look at several of our departments to further fine-tune some of the findings that they had initially. So we asked them to look in the building department, we asked them to go into fleet, we asked them to look at parking, and currently we have another department that we're going to have done by the end of the summer. Bud went through, as people go through, do agreed upon procedures that we requested, and came up with recommendations, further recommendations for improvements, which we currently are now trying to put together. And finally, for the first time that anybody can remember associated with the audit, it was filed on time this year. So that's a positive thing.
That's true.
With that being said, I have put together a corrective action plan, which I will ask council to approve at the next meeting. You also have a resolution in front of you that asks that you have become familiar and have read the comments and recommendation, and that you will attest to doing so in accordance with state law. So moving forward, if you have any questions on the audit or the corrective action plan, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Okay. You want to start, Mike?
Yeah, so I noticed from the first Nissa Vashi report, there was, I think, 14 or 17. 18. 18. 18. And now this is, there were recommendations, things they found, and this has been cut down to 7, and some of them are held over from last time because there were so many. So once these get taken care of, I guess would we be basically up to speed and on point with everything we have to be on point with financially?
Yeah, just as a heads up, it's rare, very rare, that you don't get comments or recommendations.
Right.
And if you don't get them, it usually means someone's not doing their job when they're doing the audit. There's always something that can be addressed, whether it be a deposit in 48 hours, but there's usually something. With that being said, you try to focus on the larger items that could impact your internal controls. Filing a report with the state 2 days late, I'm not concerned about, but it's a law and you have to comply. But if you have something within a department where you have lack of segregation of duties, or you have a lot of cash and it doesn't seem to be getting deposited timely, things like that, that's what I'm concerned about. And that's the things that we try to address up front, and that's why we got this down to 7 comments. I have a couple more that I'm going to be getting done in the next several months, but I think next year I'll commit to having that less than 7.
And we actually noodled together, we thought through this on what areas we wanted Nissa Vashi to go in and do yet more work. Right. And we made that decision based on what we viewed as the risk. So, for example, the building department takes a lot of money in over the window. Fleet was having issues with the way they were ordering their supplies and stuff. And parking, obviously, was on the heels of the quarter issue. So we wanted them to go back in, look at all the stuff we had done. We had outsourced the counting and all that stuff. And so we wanted them to come back in and give us a kind of a new set of eyes on it. So we'll continue to do that with them.
Okay, thank you.
Page 130 of the audit.
Is that the typo? No.
We have outstanding delinquent taxes of probably over $8 million over the past 10 years. I asked you the question the other day. I don't know if you have an answer for it, but why can't we go to a collection agency and get them to collect some of that money?
Because within the state law, you have to pay your taxes currently, and when you don't, they go into delinquencies, okay? And to collect that, you have the power of lien. You can put a lien on their property, charge them interest rates that can go up to 18%, and effectively force them to make that payment. If that go through the lien process and they don't satisfy the lien, you can sell the property and you can foreclose on it and take it back. But when you look at again, this is on a cash basis, we have a 99%, over 99% collection rate, which is one of the highest in the state of New Jersey. Okay, those that are uncollected are anticipated in the subsequent year's budget and are always exceeded. So we're always turning that money over quickly. Your point to factoring that and to selling to third parties is something to consider should we not attain those rates. But I think right now our tax collector does a fantastic job.
I know, but I'm still looking at an $8 million bogey out there that we could potentially go after, and it could help us in a nice way from a budgetary standpoint.
To your point, look at the subsequent collections on that bogey. Look at the subsequent collection every year and see how much that $8 million wasn't collected.
In other words, it gets collected the following year.
It does.
It's not,
okay.
It's not a, let me say, it's not a cumulative $8 million.
No.
So, there's, I don't know, I'm making this up, there's 600,000, and the next year 500, that 600 gets collected, and it gets added to.
So just offline, can you just show me that? We don't have to do it tonight,
Absolutely.
but yeah, good, thank you.
Absolutely.
Bernadette?
No comments.
No? I had actually no comments, but thank you.
You're quite welcome.
So, so we were we're very satisfied, I would say, with the auditors. As Bob indicated, this is the first year, and I don't know how many years it got completed on time. And certainly for those of you who were here during the previous years, this audit size doesn't mean too much, but it's gone from this to this because more work has gotten done. So I think we feel more assured about. And I want to recognize the FAC here too, because they've been helpful in working with Nisavocia and adding commentary to getting these cash flow extra audits done. So
Thank you, FAC.
Thank you, FAC.
Thank you.
So I guess
I did actually have, where, did you say the affidavit was here because everyone needs to sign? Is that?
I think Heather will be giving it to you to sign.
Yeah, next week you'll be required to
Okay.
sign that you've
Perfect.
read at a minimum the general comments and recommendations.
Along with a couple of zillion things you have to sign too.
No, I did that, took care of it already. Okay, great.
Right. Okay, so the next topic is the financials. All right, so this is the quarterly financial report, which you should have in your packet, number 17. And I guess what we're going to do, Bob, here is just kind of do highlights,
Right.
areas of concern, et cetera.
Roberta, could you make the printing a little smaller next time?
Print was really tiny. It's
Was it really tiny?
Yes.
It's tiny.
It was an eye test.
Needed a magnifying glass.
I'll try to.
really
I'm sorry.
printed
I'll make it larger
tiny.
for you.
It was.
It almost looks like Janice Willett's her spreadsheets.
Who do you think taught me how to do that?
I'm sorry?
Who do you think taught me how to prepare this?
Wow. The problem is she can go through 17 of those and pick page 7, line 40. There's the issue.
So I did the 3 funds, water, parking, and current. So I'll do the 2 small ones first. So with water, our overall budget in the revenue stream is about 45% of what we anticipated. Rents are at 44%, and that's basically because of the timing of billings. Our summer bills are where the big impact comes in. So I think this is, the revenues are fine. There's no issues here that I think need to be addressed. On the expenditure side, we're at 51% of budget. Again, in looking at the salaries and wages and other expenses, we're slightly less than 50%. And by the way, I use 50% as a criteria because 6 months, obviously. Salaries and wages, however, are anticipated to be slightly above 50% because we have 27 pays this year, so that'll skew it a hair. So with that being said, I think we're fine with water. I don't have any issues unless anybody has any questions on water. Same goes for parking. Our parking revenues are 49% of what we anticipated. Very consistent in the parking meters with last year. Matter of fact, I think I'm about $60 short of what I had last year at this time. That also includes Park Mobile, so it's we're moving more towards the electronic and less quarters, thank God. In the appropriations, if you, again, just focus on salaries and wages and other expenses, salaries, they're at the 52%. So again, I think at the 6-month level, we're fine. And the other items, some of them are at 100% only because of the timing of paying debt service and things of that nature. So parking is, I think, is fine there as well, if there's any questions.
Good.
Then we go into the general fund. And so I went through each line item on the general fund, identified those that potentially have an issue, anything that was less than 50%. I tried to identify the reasoning. Most are because of timing. Some are because of billings that may not affect, either were done in June or done in July, again on a cash basis, so you can't recognize it until the money is received. State aid.
Let me just clarify. This is so the first couple of pieces is the revenue piece. So if it's under 50%, it could be, and the next part is the expense piece.
Right.
And if that's over, so
Yeah.
I just.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
State aid won't be received until the state budget is approved, so that's $1.8 million there, but we have a confirmation that that will in fact occur, so I'm not concerned about that. So again, if there's anything in the revenue stream that you want answers on, I'd be happy to walk you through it, but I think for the most part, we're right on target, right where we expect to be.
Right, any questions?
Okay, now we will go to the appropriations.
So that's page, and now this is tiny print, you know.
They're all tiny.
Yeah.
All tiny.
This is page 5.
You have it blown up on yours.
So again, any salary and wage that shows greater than 50% is probably in the norm, only because of the number of pay periods. I've identified those that were in excess of 50%, whereby, for example, the audit, we have a contract of $40,000. We encumbered the whole thing, even though it hasn't been paid out yet. The items that, like, again, just an example, elections where we have amounts greater than what we budgeted. When we look at the amounts that are needed for a general election, we're fine. As we talked about during our budget presentations to council, we did have a few areas of risk that we identified. One of those areas was legal fees, primarily because of value litigation and the unknown as to where that was going and how much that would take to, we would have to incur during the year. So as you look through village attorney for other expenses and you look through the planning board, you'll see that amounts are greater than the 50% mark. These potentially could require transfers in November with funds from accounts that we have excess in. But again, we anticipated that we may have issues with this. We still don't know what the remainder of the cost would be for the rest of the year. So if, for example, nothing happened, we'd be fine. If we have further litigation costs, then we have to assess how we're going to fund those in the subsequent months.
So, I mean, if you look at line item on that first page, 155-02, which is the legal fees, and you'll see $269,000, and we're at $180 already. That's made up of what we're calling general and labor. The labor side is under budget, but the general side is running pretty high. So 85,000 of the budget is labor, 235,000 of that budget is general. The reason that those two numbers don't add up to the 269 is, and we should probably have explained this, the budget number is a net number, so to the extent that there are credits against that number going to other places, we're showing a net. But it's really 235 plus 85 is what we budgeted for general, counsel, and labor.
So moving forward to the next page, the next item we identified during our budget presentation was overtime in the police department. And one of the issues that we're faced, which has come up since we've adopted the budget, are mandated costs related to the county jail. The county now has a requirement that officers process paperwork prior to the release or transfer of an inmate over to the county. This is required in some situations where additional officers had to be brought in to cover so that this paperwork could get completed. We're still in the process of determining what that impact is, and we're also in the process of looking at this as a unfunded mandated cost, with potentially the hope of asking for some guidance from the state as to whether this should be continued or whether it should be reassessed as to how government's going to pay for it. So also as part of the contribution to overtime, we had labor negotiations, which at the time we had no idea what the impact was going to be on the budget based upon where we stood in negotiations. And we also have headcount as the time as to when new officers are starting to be placed on duty, when they start going into the academy, when they come forward. So with that being said, we monitor police overtime, we meet with Jackie, get copies of reports of the officers and the work that they put in and the classification of the overtime. We do that monthly, and we will continue to do that to make certain that we keep an eye as to how much this is going to cost and how we're going to pay for it.
So, question, the budget is $450,000 for overtime.
Correct.
We've already blown through that, right?
Not completely. We're close.
No, because we have credits that we talked to you about. There are credits that we haven't
So,
applied.
what's the anticipated expenditure for overtime at the end of the year? Do we know?
No, it's diminished. It's come down from what it had been. It's averaging, I think, we're at $16,000 a pay. It had been at 34. In one case, we had $52,000 overtime at some point.
We've brought police officers online from doing their training and stuff, so.
So you have officers, when they're going to training, they have to have coverage. You have officers that if they called in sick, you have to have coverage.
So
You don't have a guess as to what it's going to cost us at the end of the year? It's not going to, and I know it's not going to be $450,000. It's probably going to be maybe double that?
No, I don't think so.
750?
If I had to take a stab at it right now, rough guesstimate, I'd say we're $200,000 short.
On that whole salary line?
On that whole salary line.
Okay, so we have overtime, but we also have, we didn't hire people, so we have, kind of credits. We haven't applied some of the credits to that, so right now in our heads, we're saying, $200,000 that we have to cover. Is it going to be 200? It could wind up being 250. It could wind up being 300. But right now, we're keying in on the $200,000 number. But this is one area that we will, I think, report to council every month on, so we keep you apprised of what's going on with the O2.
So I think I'll just make a general comment here, since, again, this is our first meeting. I think I personally need to understand how the police department's been operating. What was the overtime budget for last year?
It was over 500.
500.
500. So it's already almost surpassed that this year. So I would appreciate, I don't know if my fellow council members, maybe inviting the chief here and or meeting with the chief to have a more comprehensive understanding of the department and what's
Absolutely.
going on.
Sure. Sure, and we'll take you through. I mean, we took Jeff through this. Jackie Cenzo and I met with Jeff last week, and we took him through what was a purposeful strategy on staffing, so that we hired new staff under the new contract, and we kept positions purposely open, which caused us to be understaffed by 5 to 7 people at any one point in time. And so So that was the strategy. Was it successful? You know, we have a closed-door session talking about police negotiations tonight, and, you know, we will share more detail about it there.
So, I mean, I know the staffing can probably help for next year with the overtime, but I mean, is there any other things we can do to mitigate that exposure? You know, one of the, and I know some of it may be contractual, I don't know if that's possible or not. I mean, I mentioned to you is, you know, people, when they retire, it'd be nice to know if they're going to retire well ahead of time so they can plan accordingly, so they can put people in place, so that, you know, when that person does retire, you know, they don't retire like in a month, they retire, they give you 3 or 4 months headway to say, okay, let's figure this out.
But I think the chief and I said to you that this is not really a problem. I mean, people tell us ahead of time. You know, Chief Ward was a little bit of a difference, but it was still about 2 months. So, yeah, I mean, but in general, people, we know, and like last year, we knew we were going to lose somewhere upwards of 6 people, and we wound up with 6 out of 7, right? So, because 1 didn't, right? So, and we knew ahead of time. And we.
So what is our number now? What is our total number of officers?
Well,
on the
budget
road now? Yeah.
Budgeted
no,
or
active on the road?
37.
37.
And the budget is 43.
Right.
And so, Jackie, the 5 people that are going to be coming on.
Could you come up to the microphone, please,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you should speak there. Thanks.
She doesn't want to.
So the 5 people coming on board, I think you're hiring 5, right? That are going to, yes?
7.
We're hiring 7.
7, okay. So they'll be on board kind of full-time at next March?
March of next year, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. And that will help, I guess, in a significant way with the overtime issue? Yeah?
Dramatically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief Lucky, the new class goes into the academy, is it supposed to be next week or?
July 22nd.
July 22nd.
Right.
Anything else? For now.
Thank you.
So, Bob, we kind of covered this generally, but we kind of skipped it specifically on this page, which is above, under Planning Board, you'll see again, 92% actual spent on Valley Hospital. Okay, so we're already hitting the budget under the Planning Board, legal. Okay, just want to point that out because, you know, I think, you know, based on we budgeted tight this year, and we feel that we can cover some of the shortfalls, particularly in police overtime. But as we said very clearly, and I think Bob said this before, as far as legal fees went, we took a decision, the council together with us, took a decision not to go high on legal expenses and cause potentially, you know, a tax impact. We thought that if it happened at that point, we would either bond for it or we would go into an emergency spending scenario. And that decision will have to come soon on emergency spending.
Right.
Okay, is there anything else you want to point
So
out?
just as a result of going through the process, reviewing the expenditures, where we stood, we've now scheduled meetings with all department heads for me to supervise, or not supervise, but coordinate with the most of them, where they stand with their spending, what their anticipated spending is for the rest of the year, whether they should encumber funds that they know about that they should get on the record so we can actually see what we have, and whether there's any excess money that maybe they've over budgeted for in their requests, or it's just not going to happen this year. The larger ones, Roberta will sit in with me and go through this, and we'll report back to council monthly as to where we stand with that process, as to whether or not we have any other concerns that we should address.
Great.
Right, so we have those meetings scheduled for
Start Monday.
starting next week.
Okay, great.
Right, so we'll, you know, I'll do the large ones with Bob, and Bob will handle some of the other small ones.
I don't think I heard you.
What?
You weren't in your microphone, so I didn't
Oh, I'm
hear.
sorry. I'm saying we'll do those meetings, you know, starting next week, and we'll be on we'll see where we can identify areas for, shoring up.
Okay. No more questions on that? Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the last big topic is the Bond Council RFQ review.
So Heather, Roberta, and I sat down. Heather put together the spreadsheet I think she provided to you with all the criteria of the firms, their experience, their depth, things of that nature. I went through today just to go through their proposals again, just to point out a couple of things. I made some phone calls for references for each of the firms. Talked to some colleagues of mine that I know have dealt with the various firms. And so I just want to throw out some of the highlights that you either may know, you've taken from the sheet, or it's new information for you. But I think before we get to our recommendation, I'll just give you some of the more of the impact. For McManaman Scotland, they have 19 professionals with government experience, well-versed in Ridgewood's activities, recently participated in our refunding bond issue, the water and GO's secondary market disclosure. The partner signed is a Ridgewood resident. It's the largest bond counsel firm in New Jersey for the last 10 years and has a North Jersey presence. 51% of the firm is owned by minorities and women. In 2015, MSB was associated with over 100 new long-term bond issues compared to the other two firms with 15 each. The references I spoke to that I contacted believe that McManaman Scotland is the best that they've ever had in the state, and some of them have had 3 or 4 bond counsels in the past 10 years. Archer Greiner, partner's not local, he's at a Red Bank. I perceive that they have little depth and coverage. They only have 4 practitioners that serve in the government practice, and I think only one of them is in New Jersey. I contacted 2 of their references. They indicated that their performance compared to MSB, especially for timeliness, completeness and coverage, was substantially less than what MSB had provided to them. In addition, I've noticed that they had limited experience in general obligation and utility bond sales. Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood, they're mostly a national practice, primarily with authorities in areas not associated with Ridgewood, such as tobacco, securitization, and special type of funding. They serve predominantly larger entities, Turnpike, Tobacco Securitization Asset Corp, and states. They only have 4 professionals with government experience in the tri-state area, so they have limited depth to cover. And as I was reading through the proposal, I remember that in my days being an auditor, when I did the Nassau Interim Finance Authority, I dealt with them several times, and the results weren't exactly favorable. So overall, my conclusion is, I'm sorry, one more point, which one of my colleagues brought to me today. Rating agencies really don't look favorably upon changes in bond rating, and changes in bond counsel. Questions come up as to why, what the nature of it is, and in some cases, it's impacted ratings as you move forward, because if you change now and you have a sale coming up, they sort of look and say, well, why are you making that change? And again, I'm not challenging why you want to make the change. I'm just saying the perception to the rating agencies, and we don't want to impact that AAA that we have. The recommendation that I think collectively we would have is to stay with McManaman Scotland, or if that's not your choice and you want to take this a little further, I would propose that we have interviews with McManaman Scotland and Archer Greiner. And certainly council could perform those or give it to someone to do. But that's where I think we would recommend.
I mean, the other thing I think I noted with Bob today is on Archer Greiner, if you look at the way their departments are organized, they don't have a department that is called public finance. So.
And I just think Hawkins is much larger than, they provide services to large entities. I wouldn't want to get lost in there. I wouldn't want to be the little fish, so to speak.
Could you just repeat when you said earlier that you worked with one of them at Nassau? And
when I was the auditor of Nassau, I also did the audit of the Nassau Interim Finance Authority.
You did that, okay.
And Hawkins was the bond counsel for the establishment of the authority. So when we were going through to try and get the appropriate set up for what the intent of the authority was. They didn't have that much experience in dealing with that type because it was new to the area. The example that they tried to use was the Municipal Bond Corp from New York, which didn't apply to Nassau County, but they tried to structure it that way. So we went through a lot of issues in trying to finalize that and getting it to where it should be. I had put that out of my mind.
I guess so. Questions, Jeff?
No.
Mike?
There seems to be a significant difference in rates when you look at Hawkins versus the other two. Is there any reason for that? Is that because they're bigger? And I mean, how would that translate into savings for taxpayers?
Well, having worked for, let me back up. These rates can be negotiated as far as I'm concerned. It's a professional services contract. We certainly could go to an entity a firm that may be on the high side and say, listen, we're doing X, Y, and Z deals this year. We'd want a rate that's more competitive, and we can negotiate it. Doesn't have to be what they throw in front of us. But usually what happens is those that have the best reputation, so to speak, are going to charge higher. But you get what you pay for. The issue that was pointed out to me today by one of my colleagues was that one of the smaller, Archer Griner, couldn't cover a meeting with the local finance board because the partner's on vacation. They had nobody to back them up. So if we get into situations where we have conflicts or you have timetables that you have to meet and you don't have the depth like McManaman has of 19 people, then you sort of get stuck on it.
So let me just also point out that we have this item on closed potentially because there's a negotiation aspect to this in pricing. And so if we want to take it into closed, we should let Bob know because he'll stay and we'll do it as the first item in closed because there's other potential feedback that, he might have to provide as well. So.
Okay.
So let us know by the end of the meeting if you want to. Let us know by the end of the meeting if you want to do that.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions on this right now?
No.
Okay. So I think I think we should have that discussion. So if everyone is agreeable to that and you don't mind.
No problem.
Okay, great, thank you.
I agree with you. Okay. So going back to budget, I think we're on C19, right? I'm not losing. This is just increasing the petty cash for small and miscellaneous expenses. Steve, our treasurer, is the custodian. This is for fleet. These are kind of minor. This C20 is a resolution so that we can substitute mailings of tax sale notices in lieu of putting legal notices out there. It's cheaper.
Yep.
We've asked that we defer item 21, which is the Lakeview facility. We have a meeting next Tuesday to really go and delve into prices and cost of services, and this is a big price tag that we need to look at more.
Okay.
So we're not ready to discuss it.
Right. Okay.
What is it? This public-private partnership?
It's basically the outsourcing of the facility at Lakeview to other management.
Got it. Understood.
Okay, and I guess the last one that we don't have anything for is the refunding of debt for Ridgecrest. This is RHC. I think we went through this last year when we talked about RHC. We guarantee their debt. They give us a fee to guarantee their debt of $25,000. BCIA, I guess, is the issuer of the debt and has concluded that they'd like to refinance or refund the bonds. And as a result, we may need to authorize the sale and to participate in the refunding and extend our guarantee. And so that's what that is. So I think next week we'll probably have a resolution.
Ordinance.
An ordinance. It's an ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, right, that's right. Okay.
Okay.
And then I guess Ridgewood Water we've done, right? Shared services interconnection we've done, so.
Okay. Any questions on anything else for Roberta? Okay. So we're moving on to the review of our July 20th public meeting agenda.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
We have the formal swearing in of our police chief, Jacqueline Lucky. We also have ordinances for regulations for political and issue-related signs, repealing ordinance 3066, and then I think I heard that the refunding bond would be an ordinance, right, for Ridgecrest, if that's necessary. We have no public hearings yet, obviously. The resolutions are awarding contract under state contract for bulletproof vests, also portable radios, for Ford Police Interceptor SUVs, video recording systems, UHF radios and computers for police vehicles, Chevy Tahoe SUV for the fire department, and telephone system upgrades. There's award of contract for striping of police vehicles. Title 59 approval and award of contract for telephone system maintenance and emergency troubleshooting service. Title 59 approval and award of contract for snow plowing services, or contract to sole source provider for radar system for police vehicles, or professional services contract for engineering services for out-of-service well rehabilitation study, or professional services contract for hydrogeologic consulting services for capital improvement program, or professional services contract for professional engineering services for design of ultraviolet disinfection system for water pollution control facility effluent, or contract for final additional award, emergency and routine servicing and repair of electric source, reject bids, furnishing and delivering of orthopolyphosphate, authorized shared services agreement for purchase of bulk water with Hawthorne, authorized refund of excess application fees for 257 East Ridgewood Avenue, authorized release of bond for Clear Wireless, 45 North Broad Street, accept the 2015 annual audit report and accept the 2015 corrective action plan, increase petty cash fund for fleet services, authorize tax collector to charge for mailing of tax sale notices, dissolve construction board of appeals, authorize encroachment agreement for 51 North Broad Street, revise and supersede resolution number 16-137 for the waiver of regulations for A-frame signs, establish Central Business District Advisory Committee. We're going to talk about the alternate public defender enclosed, and then also rejecting bids for property maintenance services. Do any of you want any of these resolutions off of the consent agenda, which means that you want it to be read in full and there'll be a separate vote? If it's on the consent agenda, you'll all vote the same way. So if you want any of those off the consent agenda, let me know.
By when? Tonight? Tomorrow?
Well, as soon as possible.
Now?
If possible, if possible.
Can
And if
I
you
let you
can't
know
do it-
tomorrow? Can I let you know tomorrow
If you
morning?
can't do it now, call me tomorrow.
Thank you.
Because, yeah, I'll need to know.
All right.
Okay, and with that, we're on to our manager's report.
Okay, I promise I'll speak into the mic. So I was saying to Susan on the way here, this could be one of the longest. Don't look at me like that, Heather. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about July 4th. Thanks to the volunteers who all worked to make a wonderful event this year. I wanted to provide some July 4th by the numbers to the council and to the public. So I'll just highlight some of this. 6 months in advance, we reserved the reviewing stand. 2 weeks prior, we had 2 people prune the parade route, 3 tree removals, 19 trees pruned. 1 week prior to the event, we have 6 people that install the fencing. We actually put out 7,500 feet of fencing with 940 posts. 3 persons installed the grandstands by the reviewing stand. I'm going to skip a couple here. Post-event, obviously, there's a cleanup. Barricades, 315 barricades were used, 125 are ours. We had 34 police officers for the parade, 71 officers for the fireworks. Big. And as far as the emergency services go, we had 26 emergency services volunteers staffing 3 ambulances, 1 first responder vehicle, 4 special ops vehicles, and our field communications unit, which handled dispatch in place of the dispatch center. We also get outside mutual aid. During the parade, just FYI, we had our ambulances and staff treated 6 people. 1 at a village residence, 5 on the parade route. 2 people were transported to Valley Hospital. Total of 182 person-hours for the parade event for our emergency services people. Kudos. For the fireworks, 34 emergency services people, staffed 3 ambulances, 3 special ops vehicles, etc. We treated 6 people during the fireworks, transported 5 to Valley Hospital, and the emergency services people put in a total of 221 person-hours on the event. So again, really great. I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the numbers. I also think that we will get a better idea of what it really costs us to run this event. That's as an aside. All right, so we're going to go out and try to really gather the cost structure. Just a little update. As you all know, we have a significant detour because of PSE&G work in the replacement and enhancement of delivery of gas pipes. We've proactively last Thursday sent out an e-notice detailing the detour, providing a map of the detour. We've assigned 6 police officers, 1 from Waldwick, to take care of trucks that were routing through Waldwick. And as I noted in my e-notice, this is tough. This is going to be a tough couple of weeks with this particular detour. The police on the detour are working hard so that they can minimize the negative impact, and we're continually assessing the situation. After these 2 weeks, they'll go to another piece of Glen Avenue, which will cause a smaller detour, which will be good. And then after that, several weeks later, we will have a larger detour again. Chris and I are going to sit down with PSE&G to review progress. We have some concerns with the handling and the management of it that we will be working through with them. Okay, so, and we have some concerns as to timing particularly, right, because we need to get this done before school, and we have some concerns. And so we'll explore that with PSE&G, and we'll get back to the council and to the public. A small note on Transportation Trust Fund funding. As you know, Christie ordered projects halted. In Ridgewood, we have 3 projects. One of them is paving Van Deen, was on the list, which has already been done. We're just waiting for closeout. The other is paving for Morningside, which we haven't started yet, and we won't start until the funds are freed up. And the third is not our project. It is for the train station, and it's working on the 2 kiosks, and that's a project between a New Jersey DOT and the Transportation Trust Fund people. So just wanted to talk a little bit about sewer services, because I think what we'll be doing in August is coming to you with a recommendation to raise the fees. The village currently provides sanitary sewage treatment service to 5 adjacent communities, approximately 209 connections. The majority of the connections pay the village about $200 a year. As a comparison, we pay North Bergen County Utilities about $25,000 per year for treatment services for some of our residents. That comes to about $444.65 per connection. So we're going to be recommending that we raise the village fees to the other communities to somewhere between $300 and $400 per. So that would bring us an additional $21,000 of revenue.
What 5 communities are they?
They are Midland Park, Washington Township, Glen Rock, Hohokus, Waldwick, and also Immaculate Heart Academy in Washington Township.
So why aren't we charging them the same price that we charge residents of Ridgewood? Or you said 444, why don't we just charge them the same thing?
We don't charge residents of Ridgewood. It's
No,
a
I mean, okay, so you said $444.
It's what we're charged from the Bergen Utilities for our residents that are served by them.
Okay.
And we very well, if you talk to Bob, he'll say to you, let's charge the 444, and we could do that.
Well, let's do that then.
Fine? Yes. Okay, so, FYI.
Okay.
Just a little bit about Health Barn at Habernickel Park. We received the first quarterly report. I sent it to the council when we received it. We put it up on the web shortly thereafter. As we know, they started offering programs on April 5th. Just some highlights. I'm not going to go through the whole report. There's a couple of sections. On-site programs are delineated in the first section. They've been in compliance with the lease. There has been an influx of Ridgewood residents, particularly from the Habernickel neighborhood. So the enrollment goes between 0% and like 60% or whatever. Spring break camp enrollment was 50% Ridgewood. We have a section, she has a section that she reports on field trips, which are mainly the buses. This is the bus issue. So bus procedures were enhanced during the period. For the 2-month period, there were 32 buses for 25 programs over 52 days. So it's 1 point something, less than 1 bus per day. The third section has capital investments. I was really happy to see that the $60,000 that Health Barn had committed, they've exceeded. So for those of you who've been to the facility, you know that there are new appliances, new cabinets, new granite countertops, new sink, new bathroom, new lighting on the first floor.
How much have they put in, by the way?
How much? It's over 60.
Well over 60.
I wouldn't say well over, it's over 60. I'm not sure exactly how many thousands over 60 it is. And updated kitchen and bathroom plumbing. The fourth section talks about community outreach and partnerships, and just a couple of highlights. They were sponsors of Ridgewood Earth Day at Van Nest, featured as an educational program at Whole Foods Earth Day event, working with Women's Gardening Club on educational collaboration, hosting the annual welcome meeting for members pro bono from the Gardening Club, ran a senior low-sodium cooking class for 15 village residents pro bono, participated as part of the weight loss challenge, hired 4 Ridgewood residents as part of the Health Barn USA team, including an RHS student from the RAP program. They also hosted the REACT compost class that they taught pro bono because the stable was booked, joined Access Ridgewood, and has offered Ridgewood residents the same discount as returning families on the tuition rate. A couple of things. And then there are relevant issues. The one I would highlight here right now is the fact that the air conditioning is a problem. We're going to have to fix it. It's part of the lease. It's part of the landlord's responsibility in the lease, and we're in the process of getting quotes and figuring out what to do about it. So that's Habernickel.
I just have a quick question, Roberta.
Sure.
On the 32 buses in the 52 days, the buses are just for field trips. That's not campers, right?
Yeah,
so
right,
the
correct.
campers were carpooling.
Right, the campers don't come in on buses. It's 25 programs. A couple of the programs had 2 buses drop off. So.
Okay, but there are field trips that occur still this time of year while campers are.
I don't know. Nancy is here. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't believe so. Are there field trips during the camps, during the summer?
So there are no field trips in the summer, and so if there are camps going on, then there are theoretically no buses, presumably no buses, because those folks are carpooling their children or Uber was the other, I thought. You remember Uber? Yeah, okay, great, thanks. Thank you. I'm sorry, Roberta, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Ridgewood Water, Rich alluded to this. Everybody, Ridgewood customers received a blue flyer on water quality. Unfortunately, there were a couple of errors in that document. One was that they listed the lead reporting date as of 2015. It should have been 2012, and reversed the PFOAs and PFOSs. So we're going to be sending out corrected copies. As we said earlier, water forums will be on July 27th and August 2nd to take anybody from the 4 communities through this. It will be RSVP. We will videotape it. We decided today we'll videotape it so that we can put it out there if you can't make it, or we, hit
Great.
Huge amounts of people. Just a little update on usage. We know that Stage 2 went into effect on June 23rd. The week leading up to the 23rd, the average daily usage was 13.81 with a peak of 15 million gallons on the 22nd. Since instituting, we've dropped down to 10.87, a reduction of about 3, and a low on June 28th of 8. So our goal in Stage 2 is to keep the average below and cause us not to have to put in further restrictions. The enforcement, as you know, the enforcement was ramped up. We have a rotating team approach. Summonses issued to date is 37. Public notification was really significant this year, all right? We put out e-notices, we did robocalls. The fire department personally put notices at everybody's door. Editorial by the fire department, Bergen Record News article on Facebook. So that's kind of the highlights. I just wanted to say a little bit about dogs in parks. Okay. I know that this has come up as an issue, and as you know, I had asked Dawn to do some preliminary work on this. She spent some time with Tyco discussing this, and their recommendation at this point, and we have to decide how you want to move forward, is not to allow dogs in parks. Several reasons. One of them is liability, particularly with increased incidences of bites. There is a dog park in town right now by the county park, right? There's a concern about increased fecal solid waste in the parks where children have sports and could roll in the grass. It could be an issue with camps and sporting events. And we do have to talk about enforcement at some level. The suggestion that came to us through the work that Dawn did is that the ordinance should change to include all town parks or municipal open space, because right now, I think, as you know, it just delineates Citizen Park, Graydon, Maple Park, Pleasant Park, Twinney, Van Nest, and Veterans. Any new parks are not in that list. And the other part is allowing special shows with prior approval, which would handle controlled events such as the rabies clinic, the doggy parade, and geese chasing. I also think, and I think I mentioned this, that several years ago, Tim and Nancy, I think Parks and Rec opined on this as well and voted 7-1 also not to have dogs in parks. So if you could, we could talk about this at another meeting, but I just wanted to put that out on the table and we could decide what we want to do with it. I just want to make one comment on I'm almost done. Overnight parking. We got a complaint raised by 2 residents on Heights and West Ridgewood. I think Mike knows about this because it went to CSAC. The problem was consistent overnight parking on their street, mainly because there's apartment buildings up the street and there's not enough parking in the apartment buildings to house, I guess, the tenants and guests. This is an issue that I think we need to bring to the council, and the council has to opine on. And maybe with the help, I don't know, Mike, what you think about this, of CSAC, because right now the ordinance reads that there is no overnight parking in the village. And although we have some policies that we've put in place where we waive that restriction, there's no clear language in the ordinance that suggests that the chief of police can do that. There is some language in the ordinances that suggest the village manager can make some decisions relative to that. But right now the ordinance says no overnight parking. So we have to think about things like people having construction done in their houses, their private homes, visitors, apartment buildings versus private homes, because there are different kinds of issues in both, and how we want to, set a policy on this. So I just bring this because there are a couple of people on that particular street that would like us to take action yesterday on doing something about it, but it has some other ramifications. So I put it out there for you to maybe mull over. Footprint study, as you know, we undertook the study. We're using external consultant, RSC Architects, to examine all village properties and buildings, to study the current state, valuation of the condition, as well as effectiveness with recommendations and various options going forward to improve the productivity and quality of lives for our staff. So we have a work session on July 27th that I think Jeff and Susan are coming to, which will be a detailed review of the proposed document. And then hopefully early August, I'm hoping if it's in good shape. If it needs additional work, we'll have to fork it back to the consultant, present to the public and to the council. Okay. Just an update, I sent you guys a note when this happened, but we did refund the 2007 bond issue with McMenamin. We really did much better than anticipated. We thought we would save about $1.1 million over the next 17 years in debt payments, and the number came in at 1.5. There were a couple of reasons for that. One was the flight to quality, because this was right after the exit vote in Britain. So we kind of rode on that coattail a bit. The other was the timing of bringing it to market. It was the end of the month. July is the biggest payout of municipal bonds for the year, so money was being freed up on the investment side, so that kind of helped us also. Dylan's still here. Please join me in congratulating Dylan in his achievement of becoming a CIO through the certification program at Rutgers. I was really honored to attend his graduation. And celebrate with his professors and classmates. I have to say they're an interesting bunch of people. I'm going to end at that because I don't want to go there. The whole point was to develop and to invest in our IT person, and now he does have his CIO license. And the whole point here was keeping IT, our professional, current on trends in leadership, communication skills, public service technology. So it was all about leadership and strategic planning and financial management. And we're looking forward to Dylan working on some strategy work for the village now going forward. And he is also the first Bergen County graduate for the course. So we're proud of that too. So again, thank you. Meet the manager, currently scheduled Monday, July 25th, 5:30 to 7:30 in the manager's office. I've moved it out of here and put it into my office. I used to have it here. Events that are coming up, Cashore Shell, July 14th, the McVeigh family, Farmers Market at the train station. You heard, I think the movie in the park tonight was canceled because of the weather. It's going to be rescheduled for next Wednesday. And it's kind of later breaking news, and it's kind of important, so I just want to mention this. We just received word that information and application materials are available for the Bergen County Open Space Trust Fund Program and the Bergen County Historic Preservation Grant Program. They just went out on the web. For the Open Trust Fund Program, which is the one that the village normally applies for, there's a new feature on this program, by the way, Tim Nancy. There's a new feature, which is you must file a declaration of intent to apply, which was not the case before. By Wednesday, August 10th, we have a little time, with a completed application by October 13th. Historic Preservation Grant Programs due on July 25th. Application full due by October 13th. The staff is working on ideas for the open space grant. We have a little time so that we can present you with a couple of thoughts that we have on that. The Historic Preservation Grant is something that we don't do, but it might interest the Friends of Shedler, vis-a-vis the house. And my last item, I'm so sorry, a heat advisory was just issued for tomorrow between 8 and noon to 8 o'clock tomorrow. So we put that out on the website. Obviously, extra precautions if you're outside, check on relatives and neighbors. Library could be used as a cooling center, so can our rec center downstairs. And that's the report. Apologies for the length.
Okay, great, thank you. So moving on to council reports. Jeff?
So the Financial Advisory Committee met on Monday. We welcomed 3 new members, Bob Koch, Nick Whitney, and I think David Huff. We're in the process right now of kind of putting together a hit list of looking at opportunities where we can potentially increase the revenues of the village and looking at some of the underutilized assets. One in particular may be the water treatment plant. We might want to look at opportunities around that. So that list will be put together, I think, in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, it's going to be floated by the village council, so you guys can take a look at it and say, yeah, go after these or not. That's what's happening there. Do you want me to talk about the planning board? Do you want to talk about that?
No, that's your job now.
It is?
It used to be my job, now it's your job.
So fill in the blanks where I'm missing some stuff, please. Okay. So the planning board met on July 5th, and we welcomed in a new chairman, Richard Joel, and a new vice chairman, Joel Torrielli, and a couple of new members. We have Melanie McWilliams out in there. She's not even looking, but she's also a new member of the planning board. And Dave Scheibner from the village is on the planning board. So we're looking forward to some juicy topics that are coming up over the next few weeks.
Always.
It should be fun. So that's it.
Thank you.
Good, you made up for my long report. That's good.
Councilman Hache?
The only meeting I've had was just today with Chamber of Commerce. And I actually jumped in by surprise. They weren't expecting me until September, but the bulk of the discussion really centered around the whole parking issue. We talked about this, the idea of getting the community to work together. They expressed a lot of concerns for the parking, as well as the support for a comprehensive parking solution, which I thought was key. They had some concerns because, feeling that majority of the Ridgewood residents don't frequent the CBD because of parking. Most patrons are from out of town. They mentioned that one big retailer in downtown went through their records last year, and only 4% of the top 100 customers were from Ridgewood. So they were very concerned that we're just not attracting enough people into the downtown. They had mentioned that there were some opportunities, that there are a couple of networking groups that they encourage folks to attend some of these events. The Ridgewood Chamber networking group, RCNG, and there's also a separate women's group. They meet regularly. They will forward me the dates and times of the meetings, but apparently they're very well attended, very nice events, some adult cocktails and so on. So, that was it. The other discussion that we had was just sharing the things that Englewood had been doing in their CBD to improve the shopping and dining experience, and maybe we can have some takeaways of that for us. But that was it.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilwoman Walsh?
So I have my responsibilities this term will be Citizen Safety Advisory Committee, Arts Council, and League of Municipalities. So my first CSAC meeting is tomorrow evening. I missed the Arts Council. It literally happened, I think, the day after we were sworn, so they weren't able to notify me of their meeting time, and the League of Municipalities doesn't start until September, so I will have more to report after my first meeting tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. The Shade Tree Commission met on Tuesday, I guess, and we're moving forward with work on the 5-year forestry management plan with the grant that was approved by the council. So the timeline is, there's several milestones that we're going to hit, but we're going to discuss the final draft at the Shade Tree meeting in September. In November, the final plan should be ready to present to the council, and then by December, if everybody's okay with everything, it should be submitted to the New Jersey Forest Service Department, and it will be approved by them, and then that'll help us navigate street tree issues. That'll help us with grant opportunities to deal with trees and maybe get more trees planted and take care of some of the trees that we have and identify diseases and things like that. So that's all moving forward, and by the end of the year, we should have our 5-year forestry management plan in and ready to go. So that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I just have a few things. The 4th of July committee met Monday evening to go over our, review the program and how everything went. It was our year-end or year-event meeting. July 4th was a great success, and a little bit of rain did not dampen anyone's spirits, so everything really went great. We have suggestions for improvement next year that the committee went over. A couple of issues with some individuals sitting on the island, in the Garber Square Island. There was some concerns with safety there and whether or not that should be permitted or not next year. There were some specifics that they are going to be clearly identifying where barricades need to be situated a little bit more efficiently and effectively to prevent cars from coming through, which this year was a little bit of a problem. I think the vendor trucks in the library gate inside of the library parking lot worked much better this year and was a lot less wear and tear on the field. The fireworks are absolutely spectacular, with or without the rain. And the only other issue apparently was that the Irish Pipe Band traveled too close to the group right in front of them, presumably, or actually too far apart, sending the parade into a little bit of a disarray. But we'll speak to the Irish Pipe Band next year and make sure they get it straight. And tomorrow night I have HPC. I do have a little bit of a scheduling conflict we hadn't anticipated. When we did our council liaison selections, I also have access, and evidently both meet on the same Thursday night. So I'm going to try and figure this out, but it'll will work out at the end of the day. And that's my report. And so we are on to public comments.
Roy Halliday, 374 Evergreen Place. We're having our grandkids tomorrow evening, 3 of whom are daughters, and we'll have great fun telling them that Ridgewood is now being governed by 3 ladies. First and foremost, I want to congratulate the previous council for having selected Police Chief Lufke. I think she represents the best. She's got the presence, she's got the character, and she earns her respect not by packing heat, but through her personality. I think she'll do a great job for Ridgewood. Secondly, I don't have to repeat how I feel about Roberta, the best village manager we ever had. And I do hope some of you don't sharpen too many knives, because if we lose her, Ridgewood will be losing a great asset. And we're talking about the snow. And there is a difference between 2 inches of powder snow and 2 feet of wet snow. Big, big difference.
Understood.
So, and I tell you, the funny thing about this is that for years before Roberta came, I travel a lot and I use a car service. Ridgewood, this great Camelot, was the butt end of the jokes among the drivers, because we were the last town to clear the snow, to clear the leaves. In many, many years, you had these sandwiches of leaves and snow and ice. So thank you, Roberta. Now, as far as our mayor, people would know that the mayor and I disagree on more issues than we agree on. But from the bottom of my heart, I want to wish you well, because if you succeed, we all succeed. If you fail, we fail. And my advice to you, two pieces of advice. One, people's memory is not as short as you think it is. That's one. Secondly, start thinking long-term about what is good for the village. and stop pandering to your base. So before you jump into repealing Ordinance 3066, I hope you think through what it all means. But I mean it, Ms. Knudsen, I want you to succeed, because if you succeed, we all succeed. Now, let me make a couple of comments. I was pleased by Mr. Hashay's points about the Central Business District. I must admit he's a bit more diplomatic than I am when he talks about the downtown has less vibrancy than it had when he was growing up. I've always maintained we're in a decline. I probably should use less vibrancy as being more diplomatic, but we are in decline. One of the things I would like you to think about, and I've been talking about this for the last 10 years, and is that if we can compare Ridgewood with 2 or 3 other municipalities of this similar socioeconomic standards, like Wellesley, Massachusetts, Bronxville, New York, and I tell you, their downtown are far more dynamic than ours is. They have more density, more apartments, more parking, and it's something they do extremely well. They probably control their vocalantes a bit better, but that's something we should worry about. But if you could do this, I mean, by starting out by number of people in the village, in the towns, average income, square footage of commercial space, taxes being generated, income being generated, I'll bet you anything that Ridgewood falls far behind. We have to stop sitting on our laurels and do something about it. One other thing, I know you're going to close session, and one of the things you talk about is the hospital. I am, as you know, a big, big supporter of the hospital. Big, big supporter. Not because my wife served with distinction as a trustee. And I can tell you, if my wife got paid minimum wage for every hour she spent at the hospital, she'd be a very wealthy woman. And apart from being a director, trustee, she also, for years and years, volunteered at the entrance, the reception desk, wheeling patients, etc. You are in a no-win situation. The courts are going to rule in favor of the hospital. The hospital is one of the top 5% in the country. We should be proud of it. Just pandering to a few neighbors with their short-term interests is not the way to do it. And I take issue with Mr. Hashay in his campaigns when he talks about we have to sue them, we have to really show how tough we are. Let me tell you something. The hospital, you're not negotiating a term sheet for a hedge fund, okay? You're really negotiating a matter of life and death. In spite of the fact that they are very, very limited in what they do and the need to really improve and renew, and they're still so good at it. So think in terms of the long-term good of the village. And remember, it's not a term sheet you're negotiating, it's a matter of life and death. So at some point, well, this is my point, but anyway, good luck. And Susan, best of luck to you. I want you to succeed, and I mean it sincerely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Boyd Loving, 342 South Irving Street. There was a discussion tonight, just a very short discussion about repeat parking and what can be done to try to enforce the people who repeat park. Somebody made a post on social media. In fact, it may have been an article that appeared on the Daily Voice website. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but it was somebody who worked in one of the shops in town and indicated that the reason that they love Park Mobile is that they can repeat park without having to leave their place of business. So I recently used Park Mobile when I was in West New York or Union City, and when I went into it, it said that you can only park in this location for a certain number of hours. I don't know if that is built into the system we have in Ridgewood or not, but it seemed like after I read this article that this person parks in a spot in front of their store all day long, and every 2 hours or 3 hours just goes into Park Mobile and ups their thing. So I think we need to check with Park Mobile and make sure that there's a restriction in the software that prohibits somebody from repeat parking in the same spot. Because if there isn't, that is just making it easier for people to repeat park. Also, with respect to repeat parking, I think I mentioned at the microphone maybe a year or so ago that we visit Hoboken frequently because my daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter live there. And in Hoboken, they've got it kind of down to a science to try to find repeat parkers. And they use an automatic license plate reader. Their parking enforcement vehicles are equipped with a system, and the van drives down the street, and it automatically records the license plates of the vehicles that are parked. And then they come by a few hours later, and then a beep goes off in the van if they've gotten a plate that is in the same spot that it was a few hours ago. I don't know how much a system like that costs, but it would seem to me that that is something that should be investigated and determined if it's worth it to put it in our parking enforcement vehicles. That may make it a lot easier to try to find these people who seem to be occupying spaces in front of stores. That seems to be a big thing. People are occupying street spots. The street spots are very valuable. I realize that it's difficult to try to find those people if you're out on foot, but if you've got an automated system that can do it, it may make it a lot easier. Another thing that I'd like to mention about parking is that several times when I've been sitting in the audience, I've heard people up on the dais talk about the number of spaces that are going to be lost when Ken Smith is developed, and the number of spaces that are going to be lost when Brogan Cadillac is developed. But I've never heard anybody on the dais talk about what we could do to try to get public parking at those locations. I believe the law allows you to incentivize the developers to provide public parking. And I don't understand why the previous council never mentioned that as an option. You could go to Ned Canselmo and offer him some incentive to provide public parking at his location, and you could do the same with who's ever developing Ken Smith. Don't know why that wasn't selected as an option. I know there are many communities that do it. They provide some sort of tax rebate or something else to encourage the developer to provide some public parking at the location. So maybe with the new council in place, that is something that can be considered. Going to Ned and going to whoever is going to develop Ken Smith and providing some incentive for them to provide some public parking spots at the location. The last thing I'd like to mention is that I was somewhat stunned that only 37 summonses have been issued with respect to the sprinkler, the stage 2 water restrictions. Frequently, I leave my house at about 6:30 or 7 in the morning to head over to the post office, and in the area of South Irving Street and Ridgewood Avenue alone, I see that there are 3 buildings that routinely sprinkle on Mondays. So I don't know what time the enforcement agents are going out to try to find these people who are having the sprinklers on, but I would suggest that maybe somebody could come in a little bit earlier than 8:30 if they start at 8:30, maybe around 6:30, because that seems to be when the automatic sprinkler systems are really being used heavily. People turn them on 5 o'clock, they go off at about 7 o'clock. So if you ride around early in the morning, particularly on a Monday, you will find a number of people who have their sprinklers on, particularly some of these garden apartment complexes, and this number of 37 may be able to jump way up, and you may be able to convince some people to turn off the water that they should not be using. Thank you very much.
I just actually have a quick question for Roberta. I thought that we corrected the vulnerability in the Park Mobile repeat parking issue. I thought that we addressed that quite some time ago.
Well, no, because the way Park Mobile works, at least here, is Park Mobile is a payment mechanism, just like a meter. It acts just like a meter. Mm-hmm. So a meter will allow you to go in and put more quarters in.
Right.
Park Mobile does the same thing. Park Mobile also doesn't distinguish one spot from another. It only has an area that, right, so it doesn't know what spot you're in necessarily. So that's that. As far as the summonses on water, we actually do have people out at. Tom was here at 5 o'clock in the morning. Every week we have a different crew that goes out. We have deputized a whole bunch of people. So we've deputized them in water, in building, in, help me, in fire, and engineering. So every week, and Mondays is a really good day, I absolutely agree. We have people come in at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we do that. Other days of the week, I mean, we still get tips. We get a lot of tips. A lot of people complain about this. And, you know, we walk a very fine line because, you know, and we should take this up as a council also. When we do enforcement well, we get criticized. So, you know, when we did the leaf enforcement extremely well, we got criticized by some. And other people loved it because they thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. So we have to really think about how we do this. And we've issued a bunch of warnings because when we're told about someone, we go ahead and we warn them, and then we go later on. We have to see it actually happen. So I don't know if there's anything else. And as far as the LPRs go, they're expensive. I think, do we have one of them? We have Uno. We have Uno LPR right now, license plate readers. We're looking to hook them into Park Mobile and to be able to absolutely scan. So I think the bill was high to do a lot of them, so we're kind of prototyping. We're piloting with one. So more to come on that.
Okay, great. Any other comments? None? Resolution to go into closed session?
Be resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that the Village Council meet in closed session on July 13, 2016 at 7:30 p.m. or soon thereafter as a matter on the agenda can be reached. And that said closed session be held in the caucus room of the Ridgewood Village Hall, 131 North Maple Avenue, Ridgewood, New Jersey. And be it further resolved that the matters to be discussed in closed session are limited to legal matters to include Valley Hospital, COA, Ridgewood Citizens for Reasonable Development, North Walnut Street Redevelopment Zone, personnel contract negotiations to include Police Department, Bond Counsel, and preservation, and personnel to include appointments to Planning Board, Historic Preservation Commission, Financial Advisory Committee, Ridgewood Arts Council, and appointment of alternate public defender. These matters are allowable under NJSA 10:12 et sec. And be it further resolved that the minutes of this meeting shall be made available to the general public once such matters have been deemed completed by resolution of the Village Council. May I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Yeah, I